It's just a little noisy with the walking around and stuff. Thank you. Got quiet. Okay. Now, the Atlantean conspiracy, progression to major events. We'll start with 50,000 BC. But things were going on and going wrong way before that. If you remember, we talked about yesterday 208,216 BC as we entered the evolutionary dark cycle, because that's when D12 current could no longer anchor into the planetary grids. There was so much damage to the grids. So from then, it got worse. There are periods that I think we reviewed very briefly on one chart. I think it's in this book. It was some of the more recent data, where it explains there was literally a period between, I believe, 148,000 BC and 75,000 BC, where humans literally lived in subterranean civilizations because the Anunnaki races had come in force and taken over the surface. They were literally on planet. And then there was something, I believe it's 75,000 BC, I have the exact date in the other text, where it was something called the Inner Earth Rebellion, where the races from Inner Earth opened the portals and came up, because the Anunnaki races were starting to go through, trying to break through the portals of Inner Earth to raid there too, to get the halls of Amentai. So the Guardian races literally all got together, and some of the Illuminati races that didn't like the Illuminati ones that were on the surface all got together, and they prevented them, and they kicked the Anunnaki off the planet temporarily. So there has been this long history that goes back way longer than this, and we're just talking third seeding history. Remember, we were seated here 250 million years ago after the fall from Terra 550 million years ago. There were huge amounts of history that have to do with seeding one that culminated in the electric wars and total destruction of the races where they had to be reseeded. There's a huge history of seeding two. Some of that history is touched on in the Voyagers Volume 2 book, so I don't try to incorporate it into this because it is somewhere else. But this is just seeding 3 history. And this is the history that'll wake up our DNA template and our tribal shield with its original D12 coding. When we start to remember this and we start to see the sequence, feel the frequency sequence, and see the sequence of events. So we'll start right now with 50,000 BC. After a whole bunch of other stuff took place, in 50,000 BC, there's something called the Lemurian Holocaust. Jehovah and Anunnaki and their Anu Melchizedek Orantia Illuminati humans infiltrate Lemurian Marahavi. They allow Dracos, which are Omicron Draconian plus human hybrids, all right, to infiltrate, and it culminates in the destruction of the Maravi Pacific continent. What was really funny is the Jehovian Anunnaki, they became the primary force here in the Lemurian areas. Now the Lemurian area, what was called Lemuria, was the continent called Marahavi that was over in the Pacific. It was smaller than Atlantis, and it was called like the crescent continent because it actually shaped like a crescent. These maps we'll see before too long where the original continents were and then where they became island nations. So this was taking place in what we now call Hawaii, technically, because Hawaii is what is left of the Lemurian continent. The Jehovian Anunnaki were taking over, and they allowed the Dracos to come in to try to help them, but then the Dracos tried to take them over. So the Jehovian Anunnaki decided they wanted to be nice, and they tried to rally with the people of Atlantis and the Grail Lines and anybody they could get to help them to use the technologies to stop the Dracos. So they managed to get most of the Dracos trapped in underground tunnels. There's underground tunnel systems all the way beneath the ocean floor, literally, beneath the continent and beneath what we call the ocean there now. They used the crystal generators, which are massive crystal pylons, which are like, building-sized crystals, and most of them are selenite, not just quartz, but selenite, because they run the frequencies better. They use those through the planetary grids. It's a scalar technology, scalar pulse technology, to try to seal the Dracos in to the Lemurian caverns. But what happened instead was they miscalibrated and they blew up, literally blew up the center of the continent, its main grids, and it literally shattered some of it. It created a mess. And again, part of it went into reversal, and it went into Phantom. Now, Phantom Matrix, as we talked about yesterday, started way before any of this. The Phantom Matrix is what was created 250 million years ago during the Lyran Elohim Wars, when Stargate 12, Universal Stargate 12, was originally blown up, and part of this time matrix grid literally was put into a black hole subtime distortion system. So the Phantom Matrix this is where all these fallen angelics are coming from, and it has a huge bearing on Earth history as well. They don't talk about it. In fact, they didn't introduce the full concept of Phantom Matrix, until the most recent information that was given after October of last year. So we'll integrate that in as we go. But They managed to blow up the grids in what are now the Hawaiian Islands. That was the Lemurian Holocaust. In 28,000 BC, there was something called the Atlantean Holocaust. The Circe, Jehovian, and Palladian, Nibiru, and Luciferian Anunnaki and their Melchizedek Illuminati humans attempted to seize inner Earth and Atlantis, culminating in cataclysm that reduced the Atlantic continent to 3 island nations, Brua, Nohasa, and Lohas. They are still visible. They're just renamed. So we have no idea. We're actually, part of Atlantis. Atlantis is right. What is left of it is sitting right in front of our faces. This one, Lohas, is England and Ireland. England, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales. They were all part of what was Lohas, Atlantis. Nohasa is now called the Bermuda Islands. Brua is what's left of the land around Sarasota, Florida, that went down into the Gulf of Mexico a little bit and down near where Cuba and those things are. These were all part, once, of the continent of Atlantis, and we'll show you the maps in a little bit. So, same thing happened here. This story was hysterical. Each one of these has literally a story. I mean, it could be a book unto itself of how it all happened and that kind of thing. We have some of this story done, and this gets into all sorts of fighting among the Illuminati races for who is going to dominate. It has to do with Thoth and Enoch heavily. And it's not in this book, because again, this is going to be in the Forbidden History book, the one that has all the detail on the history. So this happened in 28,000 BC, so that's where we ended up with the Atlantean continent becoming an island nation. 25,500 BC, there's the Luciferian Rebellion that we talked about. The Nibiru and Marduk Anunnaki, they're Anunnaki plus Omicron Draconian. That's what Marduk Anunnaki is. They're the Anunnaki races plus, it's a hybrid, plus Omicron Draconian races. They seized control of Nibiru and the D4 solar gate. They began Anunnaki race unity campaign. So it was, all of a sudden, they were trying to bring together all of the Anunnaki races into a dominion campaign. Let's all take the hulls of them and take together, the false unity thing. All right, now, okay. They tricked a bunch of the Atlantean Melchizedek races into believing that they were doing a unity movement. Reminds you of anything happening today? They tricked them into it. And they were, spaceships were coming and going at that point. There's lots of visitation, and many, even some of the human races got tricked into the deal. They actually thought the Anunnaki were entering Emerald Covenant and it was actually going to work out. What they did was they brought in a technology that was supposed to assist in restoring the grids more quickly. Now, the Founders races and the Magi Grail lines were telling the humans and the Anunnaki Leviathan races that weren't corrupted yet, don't do this. Don't let them bring these in. It would have started Star Wars if they were tried to be, if force was allowed to be used to stop them. If the Founders came in or sent some of their troops in with spaceships, they would have had Star Wars and the place would have rolled again. So that kind of intervention wasn't an option at that time. This is where humanity is living a part of its karma, because it allowed something to take place. It allowed a technology to be brought here that involved more pylon crystals, big ones that are like, you think of the Empire State Building, the size of that. Well, there were many pylon crystals that size and some of them bigger. These were massive instruments of running frequency and running scalar frequency. Well, they brought them in and they put a grid here and they put a grid in parallel Earth on coordinate locations. Where they put this grid was that there's a frequency line or a ley line that runs between Q-side 11, that is in Ireland, and Stargate 11, that is in England. They put this right in the middle of that line, so it could supposedly begin to draw energy from Stargate 11 to supposedly give them more power for their technologies. What it did was, right at that point, begin to reverse any currents that would come through Stargate 11, or through Q-site 11, so it would make Stargate 11, once it activated in the stellar activation cycle, it would make it activate on a reverse current, which would mean all the others would begin to spiral in reverse, which means the whole thing would get, the whole planet, the Merkaba would completely reverse, and the planet would get taken down into the Phantom Matrix. This was the real reason they brought their nice technologies in and wanted to do a unity movement. So, yeah, nice people. So, these guys down here, during this period, there's a major period of setback for the Guardian races, because right here was the stellar activation cycle they were all aiming for. that was the next one. There was one around 75,000 BC when they had the inner Earth rebellion and all that kind of stuff. Every time a Stargate cycle was due, it was war. Every time here. The ones that got passed over at least were more peaceful, where the planet actually couldn't hold a stellar bridge grounding. But the ones that had any potential of having the gates open, it was always the fallen angelics raided trying to get a hold of Amente. So I think there was I'm not sure, I'd have to do the math. I know there was one that was tried, or a stellar activation cycle was going to go down at 75,000 something or other BC, but that got all hung up in the inner Earth rebellion, protecting the planet from, Anunnaki literally having had it at the surface for a long time. So these guys here were aiming for this time period. They were getting this grid installed. It was called the Nibiruan Dyadic Crystal Grid. It was a series of 12 major pylons. 12 were put here and 12 were put on parallel Earth. And they were, what the people here didn't know is that these were being linked frequency-wise. There was a link being made to the planet Nibiru through something called the battle star Nibiru, which was called wormwood in the Bible. All right, the battle star Nibiru isn't a planet. It's a piece of a planet that was captured in Nibiruan orbit by the technologies they have, and it was turned into, literally, a battle planet, where inside of it, it's like living quarters. It's like a little, it's like a planet, but on the inside of itself. So it's an artificially constructed thing, and it's bigger than Earth is. Nibiru is bigger than Earth is. There was this very, very elaborate setup of technology done in order to let this Nibiruan grid work. They literally had to. Nibiru was already in an elliptical orbit, and it already had the battle star. That had been done in seeding 2. That was a mess that was left over from seeding 2. What they were able to do was they were able to connect the battle star into this grid and progressively reverse part of Earth's Merkaba and make an artificial Merkaba link from the Earth's grid up through the solar gate that they had control of through reversing part of the solar Merkaba into the wormwood battlestar Nibiru, and then into the Nibiruan matrix, the planetary matrix. Very, very sophisticated technology. And this is how they initially got full control over our planetary grids. At that point, if you block Universal Stargate 4, you can't get any information from the higher levels in, because it all goes through that distortion matrix and gets intercepted. So this became a point where it was becoming very difficult for the founders' races to have direct intervention without pushing it into complete founders' war when you'd have, ships and Merkabas flying all over the place and light balls cruising through the universe, and whoever was left when, it was over with. When those things happen, they have the potential to literally take this whole time matrix down. So that type of activity on the part of the founders, they will allow a lot of pushing to happen before they make a stand that would literally push back in that way, because they know that if there's any possible way of peaceful resolution, they will always take that way, because they know every time those kind of wars are fought that it takes a chance of literally taking the whole matrix down. So they won't, it takes dire circumstances before that kind of stand would even be made. Now, in this period of time, the Nibiruan Dyadic Crystal Grid was set up. And this was the beginning. Now, this was set up at Stonehenge, because Stonehenge, England, and this was like before the standing stones were there. All right, there were, throughout this history, this is another thing that was funny to actually look at from above or read in a book after the fact. You know how the Ark of the Covenant, everybody's running around stealing it from each other, so first it's over here, then it's over here, then it's over here? Well, Stonehenge was a funny story too, because when the first installment of these things were put in 25,500 BC, the Guardians did intervene, they pulled them out, and then the other guys put them back, and they pulled them out again, and then there was progressively, the political drama here was getting more and more Illuminati controlled. So the final thing, I think it was around 7,500 BC was the last one, where they stuck the standing stones in. The standing stones weren't just a calendar effect. What they were was you would have one stone, and a capstone. Now, they got the major pylons out of the grids here, but they were not able to get them out of parallel Earth, because parallel Earth was completely and totally under the control of various competing and fighting fallen angelic races. They could still, even though the grids were taken out here, the original Nibiruan Dyadic Crystal Grid implants were taken out here, They could still transmit by changing the coding on the Nibiruan battle star that was sending the instructions, like computer instructions, down. They could change the coding just a little bit on the one on parallel and still send it up through our grids, even if the pylons weren't there to intercept it. They could send it up through our grids and literally run it through our planetary shields. So the standing stone arrangements came in at the point where the founders race, or the guardian races, I should say, because the founders were up there trying to orchestrate all this, but it was the guardian races in the middle dimensions that were the ones that were kind of like the labor force. They came in and they set up this natural structure where by using these stones, this stone setup where you had 1, 2, and then a cross piece, the frequency would come through from the active grid in parallel. It would hit our grids there, because that's where the link connection was, right on that point that laid between the lines of Q site 11 and gate 11. It was the same on the other side. The frequency would come through, it would end up going up through one of the rocks, it would travel over the top bar, down through the other, and get sent back. So it wouldn't go circulating through the ley lines and the shields of the system. So then there was, of course, all these stupid little battles that took place that had to do with knocking the top bars off. So they'd knock them off, they'd just put them back on, and knock them off, put them back on. And it's another one of those things you just look at and say, this is utterly ridiculous. You know, just like chasing the Ark of the Covenant box around. It's like, oh, come on. It's like a bad B-movie or something. You know? So this is where we got our beloved Stonehenge. And as we know, if we can, if we see the pictures now, there's not too many cross pieces left on it. And there's actually been more things put in it, and some of the originals were taken out. So that's not the original grid that the Guardian races had put in. Some of them are still Guardian ones. Others were put in to redirect it back into our grids. So we've been in grid wars here ever since this period of time, actually before, but it really started to heat up here. 22,326 BC. See, this apparatus was supposed to have this be the grand finale. This is where, in this stellar activation cycle, this is where the fallen angelics were very convinced they had so much control here that they were going to take the hulls of Amente. Earth would go in a pole shift, they didn't care, to get pulled down into Phantom Matrix. It would end up as a satellite of Nibiru in Phantom Matrix. Like a satellite planet, it would get caught in Nibiru's orbit, but they would get control of inner Earth as well and the hulls of Amente stargates, and then continue their quest up literally through the whole universal structure in this time matrix. But the Iani massacre was the situation where I talked about a bit yesterday, I believe, where I talked about Thoth and how Thoth had been entrusted as an Emerald Covenant representative, and he was given CDD Plate 11 to translate, and how he defected. He not only defected and translated part of CDD Plate information, which gave grid mechanics and locations, part of the Book of Maps and Keys. He gave to the corrupt Atlantean priest caste, who were the Anu, Melchizedek, Leviathan races, so they could assist the Nibiruan races to finish their invasion here. Thoth went over and joined the Unity movement, and he literally led invasion teams to various parts here. The main invasion team that was led by Thoth was the one that created the Iani massacre. The Iani were the name of the Indigo races, the Magi Gray Line races that were on planet at the time. There was a whole group of them. They were a very specialized group that were literally ascended masters who would come directly in from the sound fields into bodies. They were specifically there to finish the Christos realignment mission then. It was decided that in this period it had to be done because there was so much of Earth's shields that had been pulled into the Phantom Matrix. They had accreted almost equal critical mass, which means as they continued to pull energy from the planetary shields here, there wouldn't be enough energy here to hold the rest of the shield. So literally the whole planet was going to go if they didn't complete the Christos realignment mission, which would close off the Phantom Matrix to the Earth grids. So they had come in as a specialized team. They had come in on what's called Q Site 12, which is the activation site for Stargate 12. Stargate 12 is a gate that's in France. So the Q Site 12 was located in what was Lemuria, what's now Kauai, Hawaii. So this group of them came in and they had what's called a hidden city. It was literally put under kind of like a scramble field. You know how when they kind of make people's faces scramble in a TV program where you can't see exactly who they are? Well, it's a distortion field that makes whatever inside of it invisible. It's a cloaking field. They had a city under there in the area of Kauai, Hawaii. The Iani races did. Thoth was trusted to come into this city and to move back and forth because he was considered a trusted representative of the Emerald Covenant from some history before that we'll talk about. He led the Nibiruan Marduk, Luciferian, invasion teams in, and they captured a bunch of the high-coded females. Now, all of the Iani were in gender twin pairs, which means they all came in together with their literal, like, acadic level twin, where they were one at the acadic level, and they came in to, when they were in bodies, they became two, but they were literally half of each other. You couldn't hold all of their consciousness in one body. And the Anunnaki races, under the direction of Thoth, literally made a deal. Said, we'll either kill all of you, or if women, you want your men to survive at all. You don't want us to capture them and take them over to Atlantis, where they're torturing people in the pyramids and stuff, because they were at that point, Atlantis was totally corrupted by them. You will come with us willingly. They wanted the women for their high gene codes, because those gene codes had the highest level of the security codes to the planetary grids. So a bunch of the women went to Nibiru with them and got trapped in all sorts of messes, where they were literally chained to slabs and raped until they were pregnant, and the babies would be delivered, and then they'd be put there. They would literally kill them that way. But meanwhile, they created a whole bunch of babies that were coded with the Iani gene code, but that did not have Iani souls in them. They had the fallen angelic souls in them. There was a time, and women who were a part of this cycle, literally all women, bear part of this pain in their karmic imprint, because it affected everyone, but especially indigo women, have an imprint there where there's almost a hatred toward children. It's not children here, but there were so many of us that wanted to literally kill ourselves, and we couldn't because we were chained. They knew we would try to kill ourselves. Because the children that came out of our body, it was like the Rosemary's Baby movie, and that's how we felt about it. We knew they were creating an invasion force, and they were using our body vehicles to do it. So talking about having a hard time loving your child, the body form came from you, but the soul in it had nothing to do with your child at all. So there's this whole cycle of pain there. Meanwhile, they betrayed the women, and they went after the men anyway. And they took a bunch of them, the ones that were no use to them because they weren't the highest coded ones, they just killed them. But the ones that had the highest codes, there were certain technologies that they had in the Atlantean temples that they could use to plug you in to like a computer network. It was a little different than what we have. It was run on scalar tech. But they would plug them in, fry their circuits completely, but they would be able to download their cellular memory. So they could get records in digital form that could be then translated. So they could literally pick your cellular memory with the technologies they had. And they did this with the men that were most valuable. There was nobody left to finish the Christos realignment mission. They took out all of the Iani, and they literally had to restart the Iani race line after this period to get the indigos back on planet with the security codes in their DNA templates. And if you want to understand why I don't have much of a problem talking out about Thoth, I don't care what good he did. I see that, and you'll see some of that as we go along in the history. But whatever good he might have done does not excuse what was done here. Because what was done here set in motion a whole series of events that has gotten worse and worse and worse. And this is supposed to be the going in for the kill period. We're sitting in the middle of what they were planning. This whole thing was planned. Now the plan got more formalized as we move forward in time from here. They made a very large headway in getting control of the grids here. They got rid of the Iani for a while. But what they didn't do was they didn't fully get a hold of Amente, because the founders shut the higher gates from the higher levels, and it created a partial pole shift. They knew it would. They evacuated as many of our guys out as they could find, but they allowed pole shift to happen to shut the gates so the invasion couldn't continue. And that made it a stalemate to the next stellar activation cycle. And that's where both sides were planning how they were going to handle that stalemate. How in the next stellar activation cycle was this going to move forth? How was it going to manifest? We're in the middle of that stellar activation cycle now, or at the beginning, moving toward the middle. So stalemate happened here. Here, 21,900 BC. Lohas, which was now Ireland, England, Scotland, Wales area, Lohas, Atlantis, the Celtic Druidic freeze-out. The Pleiadian, Nibiruan, Luciferian Anunnaki, and Galactic Federation intentionally collapsed the firmament hydrosuspension fields over Lohas, Atlantis. The firmament hydrosuspension fields were, again, part of the crystal-based technologies. They were good things. They were being used they're up and down at various times, but they were generated through the inner Earth temples, and they would allow the planet to be under kind of like a climate control blanket, so more of the areas were livable. You could live on them. There wasn't always ice in the places where there's ice now. So it was done here on purpose. The Pleiadian Nibirians, the Luciferian Anunnaki, and Galactic Federation, they did manipulations with the planetary grids, and they collapsed the firmament fields, which through the weather patterns into chaos. We ended up with an ice age from this, or an ice age in this period, 21,900 BC. Okay, they did this to force the Magi Grail King lines away from Lohas Stargate 11. They literally put Gate 11 on ice, so nobody could get at it, because they wanted it. And the Magi Grail Kings were all being, they were literally running from the lower periods of lower parts of the Atlantean Islands where the other gates were, because they were getting continually wiped out. Any remaining Magi Grail Kings or angelic humans were being hunted by the Illuminati races. At this point, they had taken over Brua Atlantis and Nohasa Atlantis, and the only place to go really was up if you were going to stay by the Stargate. So all of the remaining Grail line anybody's or human lines were going up to Stargate 11 in order to see if they could start working with Gate 11, with the founders, to stop this before it got any worse. And they didn't win that round either, because when they collapsed the firmament field, they wiped out a whole bunch more of the remaining Magis. And this was after they seeded more people. More of the Eoni lines were seeded after this. And again, more of them were wiped out down here. So it was like constantly getting stepped on. People that were indigos, people that were angelic humans were constantly getting wiped out, stepped on, persecuted, tortured, those kind of things. So Stargate 11 went under ice. So did its Q-site 11. It culminated in the 21,900 BC to 14,000 BC glacial period that affected all of those areas up there. If you look at what scientists tell us about history, there was an ice period there, and it was about 14,000 BC when the ice started to recede, so people could actually supposedly then settle, the lands that were under the ice. They're like England and Ireland and parts of North America and that kind of stuff. So this was an artificially generated ice cycle, glacier period. Now, in 20,000 BC, there's something called the Vikerus Saxion invasion. Translates into Vikings and Saxons. They're not human race lines. Alpha Centauri, Marduk Necromaton Anunnaki, and their Vikerus, Viking, Anu Melchizedek race line, which was an Illuminati race line, and Pleiadian Nibiruan, Samjaze Luciferian Anunnaki, and their Saxion, Saxon, Anu Melchizedek races, invade angelic human tribe 6 and exiled Celtic Lohas and Druidic Nohasa Atlantean Magi Grail King lines in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia. Now, Stargate 6 is in Russia. It's in these mountains in Russia. In an attempt to destroy Grail lines, begins intentional concealment of the Celtic and Druidic Atlantean Magi Grail line and human tribe 6 racial identity. The Vikerus races became known as the Vikings, and the Saxions as the Saxons. Both groups often painting themselves blue in honor. And this is like where you get into the Celtic history, and they say, oh, the Celts were blue raider races, like barbaric kind of, but then they painted themselves blue in their warrior things. This wasn't the Celts. The Celtics, the Irish people, weren't a part of that. They were the ones being raided by these guys. So the history, as you go back and look at it, what they're teaching us about, even the people that live in Ireland, okay, I'm Celtic, what does that mean? Oh, that means you were a blue raider race. You're from a line of blue raider races. They painted themselves blue and go, and attacked other people and try to take their land. This wasn't the Celtic people. But the Celtic people lost their records and their identity through what had happened, as did many of the original Russian people in the Caucasus Mountains areas, where you ended up with Saxons, coming in through Europe, and you ended up with Vikings raiding up in the area of Lohas Atlantis, and it was the Vikings that were what we call in our history now, what we blame on the Celts wasn't the Celts. They were running from them. It was these guys, the Vikings that were of the Vikerus, that had raided the Celts, that were the Grail lines that were hiding up in the area that had been Lohas Atlantis. Okay, so this whole thing begins a process of what's called transposition of race identity. We have literally had, and this is also a genetic thing that's happened, because with the grid distortions that have been done, as we'll see in a little while when we get into the Leviathan force and how they are created, there's one thing common between the human DNA and the hybrid DNA. The human DNA normally has 12 strands. The hybrid DNA some of them had 10, some of them had 11 strands reverse, but through a hybridization program, the animal Melchizedeks ended up with 5 strands forward because they were hybridized with the human lines to give them the ability to ascend off Earth and start higher evolution toward Christos evolution. They were supposed to get out of here and go up into Terra with 5th strand activation, begin that process. Now, if you take that, you have 2 completely different gene codes, but only one element of each being the same. If you shut off the scalar waves that are in the template that correspond to those areas that are different, and only leave on the areas that are similar, you mutate both species into something that looks like the same species. That's what they've done here, and that's why we all look human. Our DNA reads human.
Can you please repeat that last?
Repeat that. Okay. About explaining the transposition of race identity on the genetic level. Okay. If you have 2 distinctly different DNA templates that would have different chemical DNA, you cross those by taking, let's say, the human one that had the Christos potential. If you take 5 strand imprints out of the human one and you put it over into one of the fallen angelic race lines, 1. Now they have reverse matrix DNA, anywhere from 10 strand to 11 strand. Now it's 11.5 strand. You take those 5 codes, those 5 strands, and you gift them with that template. Now, if you want to be able to make the race that has the reverse matrix look like they're the same as the angelic human race, first you have to change the angelic human race, because there's no way their template is going to be able to pull in the 12 strands. They only have 5-strand imprints, which means you have to turn off a whole bunch of the imprints on the human side, which, when you turn off the scalar templates beneath them, it turns off the chemical sequencing in the chemical DNA chains, which starts creating a different gene code in the body. The checkerboard matrix that we'll get into talking about, which is the frequency program that they ran through the grids, turned off very select pieces of each gene code and turned on very select pieces, where you literally ended up with the same things turned on. So you've got common bodies that had started out completely different. But when we get our DNA straightened out and we start working with the D12 Christos current, what happens is our codes start to come back. All right, our scalar waves start to turn on in our templates, and our chemicals will start changing. Our bodies are going to start changing as we progressively evolve. This is where, as their DNA activates too, you're going to start seeing more and more of the characteristics that went with what their body forms looked like before they were amalgamated into this false thing called Homo sapien. The Homo sapien is not the original human imprint, and it's not even the original Anunnaki imprint or the original Leviathan race imprint. We'll get into that a little bit more when I get into creation of the Leviathan races. Where did these people come from? How'd they get here? We'll get into that. But I just want to go down here a little bit more and bring us up forward here. So here's where you had the literally European invasions began and transposition of race identity. And see, it would be done also. The mutations were coming through the grids because of what was shut off in the grids. The checkerboard matrix mutations running through the planetary grids affects the DNA. But there was also an aggressive outward campaign where they would send in a raider race that had more of the fallen reverse matrix gene code, and they would send them in to an angelic human tribe, and they've done this with every tribe, and they would they'd kill the men and they'd rape the women, and they would make the women have babies. So they would have progressively build up a gene line that had both and had more and more of the Leviathan Force gene code. And this was brutal. I mean, this was brutal on all of the people that were involved on the being rated side of this. This was even happening when we get into contemporary history. When we look at Peru and what happened to the Incas when the Spanish came over on behalf of teaching them how to be good Christians, yeah, right? They literally obliterated the Incan gene line. And I didn't know this. It was so blatantly obvious. But when we were in Peru the last time, we had a guide who was, I forget what the name of they call themselves, but it is half Spanish and half what used to be Inca. And she explained to us what had happened to her peoples, that in order to get rid of the Inca gene code, to take the best of it, but literally get rid of the royal line. They forced marriages. They would kill them if they wouldn't intermarry to create a new gene line. She was of that new gene line, and she knew she was. But it was so blatantly obvious. It's in the written history. But they were doing this all the way along, progressively contaminating the gene codes of the angelic human 12 tribes to the point where they were getting more and more reversed matrix codes every time a generation would be born. So these are some of the things we're clearing out of our DNA templates that we've picked up literally through our gene lines. The sins of the father be passed on and passed on and passed on, and they'd be amplified every time. Okay? So anyway, I want to get back down here. 10,500 BC, Luciferian conquest. Now, in through this period, there was still guardian intervention taking place to some degree, where they couldn't do it to the degree where there'd be massive war that would blow everything up, but they were able to counteract some of the worst things that was trying to be done by the fallen angelics. 10,500 BC, there was another uprising where the Illuminati races, because of their fallen angelic inspiration, decided to try to fulfill the Luciferian covenant again. Okay, here it started in the Atlantean islands of Brua and Nohasa. They fell to Palladian, Nibiru, and Luciferian, and Circe, Jehovian Anunnaki, and Anu Melchizedek, Leviathan control. The Atlantean conspiracy develops high-level organization at this point. This is where they knew next stellar activation cycle would begin in the year 2000 AD. This is where they started to plan for that, where they wanted the races to be, what level of mutation they wanted in the gene codes, and what their final organization would be, and who would be on whose side. They were starting to make those agreements. Okay, are we going to work together? Are we going to fight with each other? All right, it's interesting. The Palladian, Nibiru, and Luciferian crew are the ones that Thoth worked with. And the Circe, Jehovian Anunnaki, they usually fight with each other. This was a group where Enoch had been appointed to assist in the evolution of a bioregenesis program for Jehovian Anunnaki. He had been faithful to the Emerald Covenant for many thousands of years up to this point. At this point, under the pressure from Thoth and a whole bunch of the other Anunnaki collectives, Enoch fell to the pressure, and he led his Leviathan races into, these two took their Leviathan races, which are their hybrid races, combined them, and here's where you start to build the Knights Templar gene code. This is where you build the super race takeover, the Antichristo super race. And Enoch regretted this very much after he'd made the decision, because there was another ridiculous battle that was waged where Thoth's crew that were dominating Brua Atlantis, which was down in the Florida area, they convinced the Enoch's crew that were in Nohasa, which is the Bermuda Islands now, they convinced them to assist with this particular plan they had. The plan they had is they were trying to break through what was called the wall in time. The wall in time was a frequency fence that was erected 5.5 million years ago after the electric wars, the founders' wars, where everything was decimated because part of Earth's shields had fully fallen into phantom matrix. There was a frequency fence put up between those parts of the shields, so that side, the fallen side, didn't pull this side in. But it was a frequency fence that allowed the potential still of that matrix staying open so things could be healed, so it could be reintegrated. So at this point in time, these groups decided they were going to blow holes in the wall in time so they could begin to draw power there and make the link and try to, by the next stellar activation cycle, get Earth to completely go into the phantom matrix. What was funny is Thoth solicited Enoch, got his final agreement to work together, and they were leading their people into doing this nasty experiment. What the Thoth group didn't tell the Enoch group was they were planning to take out Nohasa as well, because they didn't want the Jehovian Anunnaki Leviathan races. So Enoch was tricked. And this is where the story of Noah and the Ark come from. Ark of the Covenant, portal passage, has an opening in the earth. It comes down in Giza. There was a story that had to do with Enoch finding out too late that these guys were betraying, and that they had already gotten the help of Enoch's Leviathan races. And Enoch knew that they had betrayed them, but it was too late to do anything because they were going to literally blow to smithereens using the crystal technologies. They were going to blow to smithereens the island nations of Nohasa. Well, they when I see, I'm trying to remember, there's a huge amount of stuff given on this one in the other book. Enoch warned a group of his. There was a small group of his that he could get to, and he warned, and to continue their gene line, he agreed to get them from Bermuda, Nahasa, over to Egypt, where the Ark of the Covenant was, because they knew that if these things went the way they were planning and the way that the Tothian Anunnaki were directing them, that there would be at least some type of, if not pole shift, at least local cataclysmic response to the scalar pulses that were being sent. So Enoch got this group of the Jehovian Leviathan races out, and he got them to Egypt, where he got them into the Ark of the Covenant, so they could go into a secured area in inner Earth, where their race line could be continued again after the fact. Now, after this led to a few more things. So this group he started to bring them into the Ark of the Covenant here. This fully came into, see, there's two levels to the story of the Noah's Ark story. This is where the twist began, and Enoch started getting people into inner Earth to preserve the race strain. By the time Thoth's agreement, the Luciferian covenant, had come into fruition, which culminated in the Big Flood, the 9558 BC orchestrated Big Flood. That was when the people were brought over from Nahasa into Egypt, into the Ark of the Covenant. All right, so there are two layers to this. There were the arrangements for what came later were being set here. I'm trying to get it straight from what I was, from the long text in the book. So here you had this interesting thing happening between Thoth and Enoch. Enoch fell from grace here, but he came back later because of what had happened. And that's where, after this period, he became a CDD plate speaker, where he had been entrusted. But again, in 10 AD, he decided to go in the other direction, and until 1983 AD. So there's the people that are channeling and bringing through information and talking to these people, these are who they're talking to. All right, we'll put the next one up, please. Yeah, it's just, I was amazed when I started to get the history coming off the place. Of, oh my God. Like, oh no, I have to tell people that? Do I really have to expose that? They like Enoch and Thoth, All right, the progression continues. 9560 BC, Luciferian covenant. Now, there wasn't a major pole shift after that. It was a slight pole shift, and there was another small glacial period after that 10,500 BC thing. And if you look back into some science, like science theory, they're telling us that certain parts, there seemed to be a quick freeze during that period of time, about 10,000 years ago or so. They're not exactly sure when it happened. So these fit in with what some of the geological information that our scientists are finding. All right, 9560 BC, Luciferian covenant, Pleiadian Nibiruans, Samjadi, Luciferian Anunnaki, the blondes. Okay, if you have anything to do with the UFO movement down in the States, people talk about the blondes or the Nordics a lot. They're the pretty ones. They look like humans and they're very blonde. That's these guys. All right, they're the ones that raided Procyon to get those pretty blonde bodies. Cirrus B, Marduk Anunnaki, which are the Anunnaki Omicron dragon moth ones, and Lolodetacron, which are Anunnaki reptile avian, Thoth Enki Zephelium, which are Anunnaki Zeta, and Marduk Necromaton Luciferian, which are Anunnaki Alpha Omega Centauri Blue Centaurs. All right, see all these forms? They've hybridized all over the place to create more of their races. All right, all of these guys got together, and Galactic Federation, and the Nahasa Atlantis Jehovian or Antia, which were like from seeding one Illuminati race lines that had been living in inner Earth, and they were starting to filter back up. All right, they all, and their respective Anu-Melchizedek races, which are the ones, the Anu-Melchizedeks are the hybrids that became the Leviathan races that started in Atlantis. Okay, they entered a full alliance under a one-world order anti-Christos agenda, formally mandated through the Luciferian covenant. It was called the Luciferian covenant. It was an agreement that they made that, okay, though we don't like each other very much, we're going to get this done. If we team up, even though we don't like each other, and decide before the fact who's going to get what once we grab it, at least we'll get it. And they knew, too, that it was getting to the point where the founders were very serious. They might have had a stalemate last time. The founders were not going to fail to get the Christos realignment mission done this time. They were not, the Illuminati races knew that. The fallen angelics knew that. So they were going to give it their all to make sure the Christos realignment didn't happen. So this was a coalition that they made, that even though we don't like each other, we'll be friendly enemies so we get the job done. So they stopped the founders from doing the Christos realignment mission, which would close the fallen angelic matrix from this time matrix. Okay, 9,000, okay. So they agreed to have this one world order agenda together. Now, at the same time that these guys were getting together, the Omicron Draconian and Odedicron Reptilian races of Orion, they form a second competing Orion Draconian one world order agenda. They didn't like these guys, so they were going to form their own coalition. Then, at the same time, the main Cirrus A Jehovian Anunnaki, which are bipedal dolphin people Anunnaki, that race, they formed a third competing Jehovian one world order agenda. So you had three competing world dominion agendas that were set in motion during this period in reaction, really, to the Luciferian covenant. They'd always had their dominion agendas, but they got very serious about them. When this coalition formed, these other two, the Draconian agenda ones and the pure strain Jehovian Anunnaki ones that didn't like the other Anunnaki races, they all got very serious about their one world order dominion agendas. 9558 BC, Atlantean flood. Luciferian Anunnaki and portions of Galactic Federation orchestrate the Atlantean flood in an attempt to take over Giza, Egypt, Great Pyramid, teleport station, because it had still been being used as a teleport station, and it is where the Ark of the Covenant was located, and its true Ark of the Covenant Andromeda portal passage. They were trying to get the Andromeda passage, Ark of the Covenant passage. The Toth Enki Anu Melchizedek Illuminati humans that took over Brua Atlantis followed the initiatives of the Samjazi Luciferian Anunnaki Larsa Kings, the Atlantean Larsa Kings. And if you go back into history, they talk about the Sumerian Larsa Kings and the Larsa Kings lists. Enoch's name appeared on the Larsa Kings lists. And they, with the people who believe they're listing like generations upon generations of names of people that had been kings. And it went back further than what Sumerian history was supposed to be. So there's like pieces of physical evidence that correspond with this as well. So the Toth Enki groups, the Toth Enki Leviathans, followed the initiatives of the Samjazi Luciferian Larsa Kings that took over Lohas. These are the guys that ended up getting control of Lohas, which was England, England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales area, sending an EM pulse from the Brua generator, which was the Florida area, crystal to Giza, causing major by a final collapse of the firmament hydrosuspension field over Nohasa and Brua Atlantis. So they created a major flood in the Atlantic by whatever was left of the hydrosuspension field from the last time they messed with it. They crashed the rest of the grids. And that was the biblical flood. That was there were several different types of floods because they were messing with firmaments for, all the time, but, to try to cause localized cataclysms. But this is when they created a bigger one. It wasn't a planetary flood. The whole planet wasn't covered with water. That 40 days and 40 nights stuff is nonsense. That was a story that was put in there to cover this, but to carry elements of it through. This is where the thing with Enoch took place, where the areas he had secured in 10,500 BC, where he could get some people through the Ark of the Covenant, this is where that was being used, where he was literally getting certain members of the Nahasa Leviathan races, which were Jehovian Anunnaki races, into the Ark of the Covenant so they wouldn't be wiped out by the floods that were coming. They also knew the floods wouldn't be permanent. The waters would recede. It was just enough to get rid of everybody. Right? Okay, now, so they collapsed the firmament hydrosuspension field over Nohasa and Brua Atlantis. Only portions of the Atlantean islands sank. Major parts of Brua, Nohasa, and Lohas Atlantis still remain above the water. In 9540 BC, the Cirrus B Maharaji Blue Human Emerald Covenant races give the rod and the staff Stargate tools in the Ark of the Covenant gold box to the Magi Grail King lines of Earth to keep open contact with the inner Earth races via the Earth's portal system. So that they gave them the ability, even though they had to close the portals at this point, because they had this flood, when this flood was orchestrated, the inner Earth portals had to be sealed again, and it was again an advancement of the Illuminati agenda. So it was not safe after this point to keep the inner Earth portals open, because inner Earth would be raided, and if inner Earth gets raided completely and taken over, that's where those crystal pylon temples are still working and activating. And if they get taken, this time matrix is going into phantom. The whole thing will go into a subtime distortion system. So we're in a big game. All right, let's see. Okay. Luciferian, Jehovah's, Anunnaki quest for possessing arc tools begins. All right, this is where just the arc tool, the quest for the arc tools in the big gold box starts here. 8,900 BC, Sumerian invasion, Luciferian and Jehovah's Anunnaki and Draconian races and their Melchizedek legions all raid angelic human tribe 10 settlements of Sumerian Ur. Now that's down, these areas, the tribe 10s were down in the areas of Iraq and Iran, because you have Q-Site 10 in, I think it's Iran, Q-Site 10, no, I think Q-Site 10 is Iraq, and Stargate 10 is in Iran. They're like right next to each other, literally. So these tribes were progressively raided in the Sumerian invasions. This is where you get all those god stories coming out about Marduk, the creator god, and Marduk, Enki, Enlil, all this stuff. And they had been there before because there were other periods of time. These were the family names of different competing Anunnaki races. All right. So this time, the Draconian races and the Jehovahans and the Luciferians, they all raided the 12 tribes in Sumerian Ur and surrounding territories in the quest for Stargate 10 control and the Ark of the Covenant gold box tools. The Samjazi Luciferian Anunnaki lines as the Sumerian Larsa kings, the Jehovah's Anunnaki lines as the Hassa kings and Midianite Hyksos kings. If you look back in recorded history, the Hyksos kings were known to have invaded Egypt at a certain point. They knew they were Midianites, but they weren't sure who the heck they were. They didn't know what tribe of Israel type person. They think they were Hebrew. They don't know what they were. But there's a history that involves the Hyksos invading Egypt and then getting supposedly annihilated, where they seem to disappear off the face of the earth. They didn't. They did the Exodus, but the story came down as the Hebrews doing the Exodus. But before all that, this is where these guys formed. This is where more raids, more invasions were taking place on Tribe 10. So you're combining Tribe 10 gene code with all these other Leviathan gene codes. And you also ended up with the Marduk, Anunnaki, and Draconians as the Babylonian and Akkadian dragon kings. The Toth, Enki, Anunnaki became the Snake Brotherhood kings, the Brotherhood of the Snake. You know the medical sign, what is that called, the caduceus or something? Guess who that's affiliated with? Brotherhood of the Snake. That goes back to the affiliation of the serpent gene codes that come through the Zeta line, the Toth, Enki, Zeta line. That was always Toth symbol, was the symbol of the snake, symbol of the serpent. And it takes you back to the stories about the Garden of Eden and the serpent. Well, if you start to put the names on who these people were, it becomes really funny. Adam and Eve weren't where any of us started, but they were where certain hybridization programs of Leviathan started. And the Adam and Eve story had to do with various competing, different ones, Jehovah's Anunnaki versus the Tothian Anunnaki, which ran as Seraphim Anunnaki, which means they were mixed with part of the fallen Seraphim races. So the story, when you look at what the Bible was really about, it becomes mind-blowing. What's interesting is in the information that was given just for Voyagers 2 second edition, they decode a lot of revelations. And there's too much to even cover in this workshop. It's just too much. But the seven seals, the horsemen of the apocalypse, all of that stuff, you would not believe what this stuff was really about. The Bible's encoded. Their stories were encoded. And only people who had the secret knowledge from the secret societies would be able to know what they meant and what cues were in them. So they're starting to give us the decoding thanks to Enoch. Because Enoch helped to code those things when he was working on the other side. And part of his redemption contract that started in 1983 was to begin to allow us, he would access their matrices because he had the coding in his own template in DNA where he could draw information from their record storage facilities. So in the Voyagers 2, there is the beginning of the story of what Revelations was about, and it's very much worth reading because it has everything to do with the trade centers going down. And it has to do with frequencies and things called planetary seals opening. It has to do with the whole mission that's going down here that's either going to literally make or break this planet in this particular cell activation cycle. So anyway, after Sumeria, they hit Egypt. 8,400 BC Egyptian invasions. Toth, Enki, Zepheli, Anunnaki, and their brew Atlantis and Melchizedek raid Egypt from Sumeria, overthrowing the Saras Egyptians, pre-dynastic Grail kings, as the Osiris king line. So these guys, the Toth groups, became the Osiris king line. The Enlil Odedikron Anunnaki combined with the Osiris king line, creating the Osiris-Isis-Horus king line. The Samjazi, Luciferian, Anunnaki, Sumerian Larsa kings combined with those, creating the Egyptian Scarab king line that dominated dynastic Egyptian history in competition with the Marduk, Anunnaki draconian agenda, Set king lines. So if you look at Egyptian history, the Set kings, the Osiris kings, the Horus kings, all of this stuff, this is the story of Anunnaki history. Anunnaki history on Earth, as they were decimating our races and our memory and our planet. Okay? Let's see. Yeah. Well, it affects the DNA, and it affects the chemicals in the DNA, so it will affect the composition of the blood as well. I know there's a translation, and this would probably get me killed if it was given to me right now, to be honest with you. There is a translation as far as blood types and being able to connect them to each of the primary Leviathan race strains or human race strains. But to have that knowledge on planet right now would create absolute chaos. I wouldn't want to deliver it, because people go hunting people down by their blood types in order to get rid of Grail line races. I do know the AB negative blood type is very classic of an indigo bloodline, but it's not the only one. It's a relatively rare AB negative. But anyway. And Druidic Magi Grail line king races that returned to Lohas Atlantis territories, which were England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales area, in 13,000 BC from the Caucasus Mountains, Russia, where they had been in exile when the Ice Age thing happened up there. They forced interbreeding between Nibiruan, Thoth Enki, Palladian Nibiruan, Samjazi Luciferian, Alpha Omega Centauri, Marduk Necromaton Luciferian, and Melchizedek human lines, and the Magi Grail lines to get the amped up coding of all of those together, and then put that together with the Grail line coding. So again, they went through the rape and pillage thing where they were creating gene lines, killing the males and using the females as breeders in order to create, to bring together all of these race lines, because they were creating a super Antichristos Leviathan race that would have as many codes in the DNA as possible that corresponded to the planetary grids. So when the time came, they could run reverse round tables and seal the deal. You know the grid work that's being taught out there in the New Age movement by people who aren't running D12 frequency because they're not activating their Maharic seal? That's the teams. The people are being used as part of those teams to run the reverse matrix codes into the DNA. It's a very painstaking effort to build up through hybridization, through rape and pillage, and creating new gene lines and combining those to get as many codes as you could of the angelic human codes mixed with as many codes as you could of the fallen angelic Leviathan codes, because you create a super Leviathan that had a chance of accessing the planetary grids more fully, because they could run more of the Stargate codes. They would have some of the security seals. They would have some of the templates. And this is why it took quite a while, too. Good thing they had all that time between the last stellar activation cycle and this one, because you couldn't have done this fast. This was a progressive, systematic, calculated, one step after another procedure. We are supposed to be the stopping point of that procedure.
Is that the
Yes.
work with...
Two people were at the same time. Go ahead.
Is that the work, like, I know of Norma Milanovic, that she's gone a lot of places and done a lot of grid work and...
I'm not going to name names on video. What I would say, no, you don't need, no, in fact, I don't need to name names. I'm giving you enough information, and the Guardians are giving us enough information that if you look at what anybody else is teaching, if they are not teaching you to activate a Maharic seal before doing any kind of grid work, if they are not acknowledging D12 frequency, if they are teaching 7 chakra systems, if they are teaching 11 center Kathara grids, which are called Tree of Life grids, or 10 center grids. All of these are clues to their distortions of the original 12 teachings. If you look at the teachings of people like that and see what they're lining people up for, you will inevitably find what is called a ruby order signature. Ruby order.
Do they know these people on a conscious level? Do they know?
Usually the people around the center don't. But usually, by the time there's a large group around the center, the center has some idea, because the center is usually not the person who was in that body to begin with. So I don't know in the case of the person you mentioned, but I mean, I know it's ruby order, but I don't know what status they are in, and I'm going to leave it at that, because it's going to turn into a literal name thing. But there is a section in the 51 pages that are coming that breaks it basically down into who's who in the United Resistance, what agendas they're running, and some of their basic affiliations. So I think you may be able to find enough of an answer in that material that you'll be able to place that and answer that question. Yes?
Just a quick question. What was going on in Far East
In the Far East? Oh, all sorts of stuff. You had Mongolian raider races coming up and attacking the Yu Grail lines that were from the Yu descent Grail line races that were Chinese and Tibetan. They were raided and infiltrated. But at the same time, the Guardian races were trying to keep pockets of their race strains alive. The Indigos, but they were like literally underground as far as social contact. They weren't awake, they weren't given, only a few of them would be given information to try to bring it through. They were just keeping the gene code alive on the planet. So there were pockets of the Grail lines protected all the way through, but whenever they'd be found out, these raidings had happened. It happened all through, up in China and over into Japan, down through Tibet. It happened all through the Middle East. It happened through Afghanistan, because there was a Grail line there. They're going back for the territory at this point. It happened in the Mayan cultures. It happened in the Toltec cultures, and created the Aztecs, which were never intended to be created here. They weren't human, the Aztec descent, but they had been. The tribe that had been raided was a Toltec tribe that was a Grail line tribe.
Did I identify the shift in priorities with the Mayans as well? Maybe serpent worshiping and blood rays?
Yeah, it's fit in there. I mean, I don't know how much detail we have on that. But when the time period, when we get up a little further, I think it's right in through here. We just mention it here. There's more information. There's a whole, I think, even in the book, even in your book, I think there's a little bit more on each of these. I'm not sure if it's in that book or the one that's coming out. But anyway, during this period, if you look at who worshipped what, there's a point that in the book that's coming out, the Forbidden Book, we get into some of that symbolism, where if you were worshiping crocodiles and dragons back in Sumeria, it meant this. If you were if you were using the sign of the serpent or the brotherhood of the snake or any of that, it meant the Toth group. The sign of the cross meant something. The crucifixion cross, that was crucifixion, all right. Our planet was crucified. But so all of these things do have a direct affiliation. You can tell by the artwork if you know what groups are connected to what fallen angelic groups that had what forms, because they would usually use the form of reptile worship if they had a reptile gene code or an affiliation with a reptile gene code. All of those things. Avian, some of them worshipped not hawks, but what are they called? Falcons, those kind of things. So all of these were tied into what the race line gene code was in the higher dimensional fields, and who was controlling what down here. Anyway, we had the Mayan raids, Luciferian Anunnaki, Toth personally, raided the Mayan angelic human 12 tribes in the Yucatan and progressively infiltrated select 12-tribe settlements throughout South, North, and Central America, and eventually they moved up into the Inuit populations in Canada, which had been people who would come over from Lemuria when Lemuria went down. So progressive, step by step, every place we put a human group, they would raid them. And the human 12 tribes were kind of like sitting ducks, because every time there was a wipeout and a reseeding had to be done, there were only 24 places that seeding would take place simultaneously. It would start with 144,000 people, 12 tribes of 12,000, 6,000 of each would be put on their corresponding Stargate and Q-site point. So if you look at the Stargate and Q-site maps, you know exactly where, repeatedly, the human races have been seeded over and over again. If it went bad this time, that's where they put them back again, because they are the guardians of those gates and the grid lines that go with them. Okay? And basically it's hard to hide them when everybody knows where they're going to be put. And that, so... All right, then we talked about before, the 3,000, or what Az had read about, the 3,470 BC Babylon Massacre, Galactic Federation, Luciferian, Palladian, and Nibiru and Anunnaki races, Steel Ark of the Covenant gold box, and Stargate tools. They attempt world dominion, beginning in Marduk Anunnaki Draconian-held Babylon. So Galactic Federation and these guys, the Toth guys, go after the Draconian Anunnaki, the Marduk crew, that are holding Babylon. They create temporary planetary magnetic grid collapse. They used arc tools at Babylon and Nibiru dotted crystal grid at Stonehenge, England, to create a reverse fire letter sequence distortions, further ones, in the planetary grids, which cause major mutations in the function of the angelic human DNA template, erases race memory, because what was really getting on their nerves was the Marduk Anunnaki group, who's in competition with them. They have a draconian agenda. They had Babylon. They were progressively getting control of more grids, and it looked like they were going to get control of Stargate and QSI 10. And that could be a real problem. If you're going after Gate 11, you're going to have an issue happening. So they literally, more than just wanting to neutralize the angelic humans, they wanted to erase the memory matrix and make it very difficult for the Leviathan races to communicate with each other, because they wanted to break up this little stronghold that was happening here. So they purposely contrived a way to use the checkerboard matrix mathematicals to create very specific mutations that would reverse part of the DNA, leave part of it normal. Reverse part, leave part normal, which would mean half of your language signals would be backwards. Right now, our languages, we were talking about this last night, our languages, if you look at our alphabet in English, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, right? If you took it and went like A, B, C, and then D, E, A, B, C, D, I think it's on threes. A, B, C would be straight, let's say. Then you'd have E, F, G, you'd actually reverse them. F, E, G, you'd have to reverse every set of them to actually get the actual language that was there. We had to be given new languages to be able to speak again and to communicate again. And this is where Toth likes to, and Galactic Federation like to say, oh, we came in and gave you languages. Yes, after you took them away, you know. Because the DNA and how it's sequenced determines what kind of sound frequencies we can process into cognition. And when they scrambled the DNA to the level that they did here, the old languages that we knew from Atlantis, we couldn't read them, we couldn't understand them, we couldn't make the sounds anymore. And this is part of the healing that will progressively take place. That's why when we use the Mua language translations to the clearest that they can be translated right now, those translations are progressively helping us to restore the original data banks on language that belong to this race. Okay. Okay. Anyway. Okay. Okay, they use the art tools, so they're trying to go after these guys to neutralize them and take care of the human races while they're at it. So they literally erased the memory records as well, where you'd have partial memory, and then the other part would be Nibiruan memory, where they literally plugged their memory grids. They started running holographic inserts, which are kind of like virtual reality pictures, down through the Nibiruan dotted crystal grid, down into the planetary radial body, which is like a projection screen. So for us to have memory, we are directly tapped into our personal radio bodies, which tap into the planetary radio body. So we started, the parts of our codes that were the normal, that weren't reversed, would hold the actual human memory. Then the other parts that were reversed would start to download Nibiruan memory, where we would progressively begin to build up the Nibiruan memory imprint, progressively reversing more of our DNA. Eventually we'd be talking totally backwards, compared to what we used to. And this has been the process by which, right now, we sit here, we don't remember who we are. We can't remember our other time vectors. And when we try to start remembering, we try to start pulling incarnational data, you can find all sorts of wacky stuff in there, stuff that doesn't quite sequence the right way. Because there's stuff spliced in between the natural sequence that wasn't meant to be there, and parts of the natural sequence were literally edited out of the memory banks on a planetary level. What we're doing with the Vecca codes, we're working with them, the Vecca codes put back the divine blueprint frequencies and the primal light and sound frequencies back into the planetary radio body and into our own, which means it's allowing the field to form again, the sound light field, that will allow the natural sequencing of our memory records on a planetary and a personal level to start coming back. Okay, let's see. Okay, all right, now when they did this, erase the memory, it blocks the natural kundalini flow in the body. This mutation that they did through the grids. It not only did all those things and erased the memory, but it blocks the natural kundalini flow in the body, causing pineal, thalamus, hypothalamus, and thyroid gland malfunctions that shorten human lifespan and block interdimensional perception in all but implanted Anu Melchizedek chosen ones, and it scrambles the natural language patterns. This was recorded as a Tower of Babel event. Now here, these body things that have taken place in our bodies since this time, because these glands, pineal is like sitting there dormant, and our scientists tell us it's like, atrophied because it doesn't do anything anymore. They have no idea what it did, right? It helped us ascend. That's what it did. these organs have been progressively malfunctioning, and the malfunction gets worse, a little bit worse with each generation, because each generation amplifies whatever coding it has. Now, these things create the chemicals that are created in the body, the biochemicals that are created in the body and in the brain because of these malfunctions, literally progressively poison the body to the point where it shortened its lifespan hugely. Where even before these mutations, at least I think we lived about 800 years, 800 to 1,000 years then. Before that, we were immortal. And they took that away by the first level of by first cutting off the D12 frequency. Then after that, they amplified that, and we were able to live shorter periods when they did the 25,500 BC Nibirian dotted crystal grid. Then they amplified it again and took us from at least having an 800 to 1,000 year lifespan down to having 75 to 100 year lifespan. And that's what we have now. I mean, this stuff is nasty. It just amazes me what kind of mentality could actually do that and live with itself. A very sick one, obviously. What's scary is it's not just a person. It's not just a mass murderer who you see in an interview and you see that there's no, like, literally soulless being that has no remorse or anything. These are races. These are whole races of beings that function with that kind of mentality. Okay. Now, 2668 BC, Joshua invasion. Galactic Federation, Luciferian and Jehovian Anunnaki infiltrate Saqqara, Egypt with Pharaoh Joshua. Guess who that was? That was Enoch. They don't tell you that in the books. Well, it used to say it in the books, but they were kind of edited and destroyed right after they were written. Enoch was Joshua, and he wasn't working Emerald Covenant yet. He hadn't crossed back over when he fell in 10,500 BC. He had not crossed back over yet in the Joshua period. He actually led an invasion. Well, kind of like it wasn't a hard invasion. He came in to, it wasn't a pharaoh, there was a Grail king who Saqqara had actually belonged to. His name was Imhotep. And Imhotep was the actual king. And he was a Grail king, and he was running the Emerald Covenant agenda. And he was trying in the Saqqara area it was like a place where they were hiding bunches of Grail lines to keep them safe from the things that were starting to become the Pharaonic dynasties, which were the Illuminati dynasties. Enoch came in, had found out, had located what was going on there, where there was a hotbed right there of the ones they want to wipe out, and he made a deal. He made a deal with Imhotep. You let me come in and be peaceful. You can be my visor. You can, hang out with me and stick around. We don't have to be nasty about this. And he literally, Imhotep said, yeah, fine. What am I going to do? Because the thing was, if he did not agree, if Imhotep did not agree to peacefully step down and let Enoch, as Joshua, come in and start the infiltration into Egypt again. Because he had the Jehovian Anunnaki at this point were trying to infiltrate Egypt, where the Thothians had been running around there for a long time, and you had a bunch of Draconians running around in the Pharaonic dynasties. So this was the Jehovians trying to get in on the deal again. So it was a peaceful takeover. Imhotep, in the stories, I guess, ends up as like possibly the builder of Saqqara. I think they have him. Do they have him listed as that? Yeah. Well, he was a builder, but he was the architect, let's say, not the person who put the stones there. But he was not originally the Pharaoh Joshua's kind of like, second-hand man. He was originally the guy who the pyramid belonged to him. It was peaceful because if Imhotep had said no to allowing Enoch to come in and allowing this transfer to go peacefully and to helping the Indigos and the Grail lines to accept this transfer, Enoch had told him he would go and tell the Pharaonic ones that were looking for the Grail lines where they were. So Enoch wouldn't dirty his hands hurting them, but they would tip off the Pharaonic dynasty people that would come in and do genocide on the Grail lines. And because Imhotep was very protective of the Grail lines, as we always had been, any of us had been in those days, all the way through from Atlantis, he let it be peaceful, because at least it kept the gene code alive still on the planet, because it was getting less and less again through the raiding. So that was the story of Zoshar. Let's see, they deposed, wait a minute. Okay, so, all right, here we go. Galactic Federation, Luciferian, they infiltrate Saqqara, Egypt with Pharaoh Joshua, and with Joshua came, now with Enoch, Joshua, came the Luciferian Knights Templar super race, all right, and the Midianite races of Israel and Samaria. Now, Enoch led them in to begin an invasion of Egypt. Enoch still had affiliations, because part of what he had, when he had made agreements with Toth to work on the same side, they had started a hybrid line combining the Jehovian Leviathans with the Toth Leviathans and the Samjazi Leviathans to get all those codes together. This is what built up to become the Knights Templar, which then, you remember when they raided the Celtic and Druidics to get those codings, then they progressively they continued raiding, and they were becoming a super race, and then they raided some more of the Tribe 10 people, and they became the Midianite races, which became the Hyksos races. The Midianite Hyksos races are what most of the stories in the Bible are about, as far as, Exodus and all that stuff, the family lines, Abraham, all these guys, they all fit into that line. Okay, now, they deposed the Saras Egyptian Grail king Pharaoh Imhotep in a peaceful surrender. Imhotep remains with Joshua Regimen as lesser of the apparent evils compared to the Marduk Anunnaki draconian agenda invasions progressively advancing from Babylonia. So it was like the lesser of the evils to just stay there and try to protect the Grail Land people that he had been, Imhotep had originally been protecting. Okay, click on this one left, please.
The Galactic Confederation is the same as Galactic Federation? You have Galactic Federation, but there's also a Galactic Confederation. Is it one and the same?
They're all related. It's probably a branch of GF that is ticked off at some other branch of GF, so they make themselves distinct.
They're just more, it sounds like Confederation.
Yeah, Confederation, right? Yeah. Hey, the Confederation. Well, it would be a good time to take. Okay, how far? Let's get through. I wanted to get through just this part. Okay, so let me see. How much?
The new monarchs can come.
Okay. I want to get through 2024 BC, Dead Sea Conquest, Galactic Federation again, and Luciferian Anunnaki race the Steel Ark of the Covenant box and tools again. They launch World Dominion campaign again in Babylonia, extending into the Dead Sea area between Israel and Jordan. They destroy Sumerian cities once located in the Dead Sea region, recorded as destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible. Magi Grail King races retrieve Ark of the Covenant gold box and tools, preventing the spread of the Anunnaki World Dominion. They would have taken over right there and got rid of all of us if the Grail Kings hadn't stolen the box back with the Ark of the Covenant, with the rod and the staff. So you can imagine this game, how this evolved over the thousands of years between then and now. With, I got it, no, I got it, no, I got it, no, I got it, I got it, I'm going to blow up the world. Oh, I don't have it anymore. Oh, they took it. You're not going to blow up the world. This is what has been going on. It's been absolutely bizarre. And we've been missing it all. That's what's the bummer. I mean, it's like right under our noses, in front of our faces, and we have no idea that it's been going on, and it still is. Right? 1670 to 1550 BC, Hyksos invasion. The Midianite Hyksos king line, the Jehovian Anunnaki Melchizedeks, cross with the Luciferian Knights Templar Anu Melchizedeks from Saqqara, Egypt, the Joshua lineage that was, as they were progressively building up, the Enoch one they had crossed previously with Toth. They were amplifying more by bringing more of their races in. They infiltrate Egypt from 2668 BC, and they finally take over. All right, this is where Joshua came in. They infiltrate here at Joshua, and then finally take over Egyptian dynasties as the Hyksos kings in 1670 BC. 1550 BC, draconian agenda Pharaoh Amos deposes last Hyksos king Pharaoh Chamos, leading to 1476 BC Hyksos exodus under draconian agenda Pharaoh Tutmosis III. Under Galactic Federation direction, Hyksos intend to invade and destroy angelic human Hebrew Tribe 2 in Israel. So it wasn't that the Hebrews were being persecuted by the Egyptians and God helped them to cross the Red Sea so they could go and have their new home, promised land, over in Israel. What was happening was the Hyksos that had come in through Joshua, infiltrated the Egyptian dynasties that were already corrupted, got control for a while. Then the Egyptian dynasties, the draconian agenda ones, got control again, started persecuting the Hyksos. The Hyksos wanted out. Galactic Federation helped them to get out. It doesn't take much to part the Red Sea when you've got the rod. All right? The rod tool is like consider a very powerful laser beam. It's a sonic frequency. There's some details in the new book that's coming out on more about how these technologies work, and particularly in that instance, how it like parted the Red Sea. So that whole story was about the Hyksos Illuminati running away from the Egyptian Illuminati that they had taken over, and then took them over back. And these are the names of the pharaohs. And if you can look up those time periods where those pharaohs are, registered in those time periods. So The Hyksos, they didn't just want to leave to be safe. They left under Tutmosis III. That's where this whole story of Moses and all of that fits all into here. Galactic Federation is the one that gave Moses the rod tool that had been stolen out of the box. That's what was used to do the Red Sea trick. But what they were supposed to do was get the rest of the box, which they had for a while. They were supposed to bring it into Israel, and this is where like the Temple of Solomon and all this stuff starts to come into, and they were supposed to use it to annihilate and obliterate Hebrew Tribe 2 that were in Israel. They were the guardians of Vortex 2 that connects to Stargate 2 in Brua or Florida. There was a direct connection, so Israel is very significant if you wanted to get to Stargate 2, which was the control gate for the rest of the gates on the planet. So that's what this was all about. So the Hyksos intended to invade and destroy the angelic human Hebrew Tribe 2 in Israel, but they weren't able to. In 1459 BC, the Israel Crusade started. The Hyksos from the Exodus, instructed by Galactic Federation, they arranged this whole thing, and the Luciferian Anunnaki to use stolen Ark of the Covenant gold box Stargate rod and staff tools to destroy Hebrew angelic human tribe 2. They intend to claim Israel as their promised land, because of Ordis 2, as beginning of intended global dominion pole shift Luciferian covenant agenda. They were going to clean, just create some grid cleaning and get rid of anything else but themselves, so by the time the Stargate cycle happened, it'd only be them on the planet. All right. They intended to claim their promised land at the beginning of the global dominion agenda. The Saras Egyptian Magi Grail kings that had been exiled in the desert retrieved the Ark of the Covenant gold box. They raided when these guys stole it, they stole it back from them. Okay? And they prevented the Hyksos from destroying Hebrew Tribe 2. This is why they never got to get their promised land. They didn't get to get in there because what they were going to use to wipe out the races that were guarding it was taken away from them, right out from under them by the Grail lines. And it was put here in 1458 BC. This started. Okay, these are connected. The Saras Egyptian Magi Grail line Pharaoh Queen Hatshepsut of Egypt receives the Ark of the Covenant gold box during these periods here, and the tools from the desert Magi Grail kings after they stopped the Hyksos Israel invasion. Her part draconian half-brother, Tutmosis III, invades Hatshepsut's temple and steals the Ark box. So Hatshepsut gets it, it's in the good guys' hands. Then it goes flying back over to the draconian hands. And now these guys up here, the Israel people, are still upset because they wanted it in their hands. It's ridiculous what's been going on here. All right, 1353, fall of Akhenaten. Or however you want to pronounce it, I pronounce it Akhenaten. That's, so, you know, did you ever see the books coming out about the hero Pharaoh, Pharaoh Akhenaten, that he went into he did Tel El Amarna and completely changed or tried to transpose his single god worship over the multiple god Egyptian worship of the other Leviathan races. Well, he was supposed to be part of a bioregenesis experiment. Part of the Emerald Covenant, he was an Anunnaki that was supposed to come in and try to help to create a race line that would allow these distorted race lines to begin to move through. And he failed miserably. He ended up on the other side. And now, he's being glorified by channels and all sorts of stuff. Guess who they're talking to? All right. So they attempt to enter the attempt to enter Hyksos Egyptian king line into the Saras Egyptian Magi Grail line for Galactic Federation Hyksos Emerald Covenant entry. So here Galactic Federation decides maybe it'll try this, right? They decide they'll be nice and yeah, okay, we want to do Emerald Covenant. Okay, and the Hyksos, all right, so they are going to do a Hyksos genetic bioregenesis program. Pharaoh Akhenaten fails in his intended Emerald Covenant mission in favor of Anunnaki Luciferian agenda. That's like the Tothstone, Jazi, Palladian, and all those guys, and is killed by competing Draconian agenda uncle. Galactic Federation defects from Emerald Covenant. All they really wanted to do was get the gene line going anyway. There's a huge history of, okay, we'll be nice now, we're really, really sorry. Yes, we'll do that to make it up, but we want to be in Emerald Covenant now. And as soon as they get in and start getting a little bit trusted, they take you and stab you in the back with it. So this has been going on the whole time. You think the founders would say, all right, already, we just don't believe you anymore. But that would be judging instead of loving and not allowing the opportunity for healing to take place. So they have put up with this for eons. Then, 906 BC, fall of Solomon's temple. I wanted to get to this point. This one just cracks me up. King Solomon, who is a Hyksos Anu Melchizedek plus Saras Egyptian Magi Grail line. All right, so Solomon was another attempt to do this, all right, where you took a mother that was a Magi Grail line, combining it with a father that was Hyksos. King David was Hyksos. Solomon was the product of David, and I believe, what was her name? forget what her name was. It's in the other book. Who is she? Bathsheba. I believe it was Bathsheba. But anyway, we have the King Solomon, son of Hyksos, King David, is guided by Galactic Federation to use, again, stolen Ark of the Covenant gold box tools to destroy the Hebrew, angelic, human tribe 2 races of Israel, to claim the Promised Land. So, King Solomon's getting messed with, even though he was supposed to be part of the bioregenesis program, failed again, and at least he got the codes in there, though. It was passed down through his line. The Grail codes were built back up and allowed an opportunity for Anunnaki and Draconian races of Leviathan descent. There is actually a gene line that they can evolve through on the planet. It's considered a secondary Grail line, which it's for the Anunnaki, or it's for the non-human souls on the planet. And it started, the most recent version started with Solomon. But King Solomon, son of the Hyksos King David, is guided by Galactic Federation again to use the stolen Ark of the Covenant gold box tools to again try to destroy the Hebrew, angelic, tribe 2 races in Israel, to claim the Promised Land and the Vortex number 2, to advance the global dominion agenda. This is funny. The Palladian, Ceres, Emerald Covenant race of Alcyone intervenes directly with a beam ship. Right? They brought a ship in for this one, intending to teleport the Ark box and tools out of Solomon's temple. Because there was a place in there, I forget exactly where it is, but it's where did they say? Oh shoot, I forget the name of the location. That is revealed in the other book. The original Solomon's temple was an actual physical temple. It was built, and they had stolen the Ark box again, and they had it in Solomon's temple. So these guys, the Palladian, Ceres, Emerald Covenant races, came in and they were going to try to use a beam ship, because with a beam ship they're very interesting. If you can find a particular mathematical coordinate anywhere, and you can aim your particle beams in that direction, and you have the ability to, have a certain particle beams can manifest and then demanifest and then remanifest something, you can simply beam in, latch onto it, it disappears, pops up in your spaceship. And that's what they were going to try to do with the Ark box, to get it, we're out of the line of fire, so the Hyksos couldn't take over the Hebrews. Right? Okay. So they were going to return it to the Magi Grail King protection to prevent Solomon's assault on the Hebrews and the advancement of the pole shift agenda. This is a funny part. Galactic Federation attempts to teleport the box. They see what the good guys are doing, right? Uh-oh, they got a ship in there. We have to go in and get it out from under them. So Galactic Federation attempts to teleport the Ark box to their Palladian ship. They send a Palladian ship in to try to beam it up before our guys could latch onto it. But they miscalculated. They destroyed Solomon's temple completely with a photoradionic wave beam. The Palladian Ceres retrieved the Ark box and prevent the pole shift agenda. They were able to get the box out in time, the good guys this time. But meanwhile, the Palladians actually flattened their own temple because they miscalculated their mathematics, because they were in a hurry to try to, grab it before the Guardians got it. So this is some of the history that we are living here. When we get back, we're going to take just a 15-minute break, because I really want to get this information to you, and I hope I'm not exhausting you yet. Just a 15-minute break. There's some food there. Then we'll get back into who are these Leviathan people. We'll finish this series here, which we're almost done with. Then we'll get who are the Leviathan. So we have that missing piece filled in. Or not, or the reservoir.
It's called Ristorante Ioni.
I don't even know if we're allowed to. Are we allowed to even legally?
Don't worry about things like that.
Would anybody come and arrest us? Or? No? Okay. Okay. We're healing the water. If any cops or anything come by, we're just healing the water. We're doing a prayer meditation dance, which we are. Okay. All right, 159. We're coming. Okay, it's. I think they'll probably be fine once I can start talking, and I can't start talking until it gets finished. Can we do this after? Does that have to be done right now? Because I really need to put the 59. Most of these I'm not going to go through heavily, because we already went through them in the reading that Az did. Most of these were, spoken about in that period, because they're the more contemporary ones. But we didn't touch. We left off from the fall of Solomon's temple, and when the Palladians blew up their own temple trying to get the Ark of the Covenant. And we go up to 26 BC, which is the Roman invasion. So this one we haven't talked about yet. So the Roman invasion. Now this actually started way before, literally in the foundations of Rome, like going back 700 BC, that type period. There's a lot more history that shows infiltration and invasion. But the areas of Italy and Greece were very special because they were another area where the Magi Grail lines and the Magi Grail kings from Atlantis were going into exile. It was called Ionia. And bunches of them were like literally going down there and trying to, figure out how to solve the problem and keep the race lines alive long enough for the stellar activation to come. So it was another area that was raided very early on, where the original Italic people, who were the original Italian people, were a Grail line group, or I think they were a human group, and they had a Grail line, Ionian Grail line with them. They were progressively invaded by various different fallen angelic forces through the Leviathan hybrid races. Now, 26 BC is when that all kind of started to come to a head, between 46 BC and 26 BC. And then by 26 BC, the Roman invasion was where Omicron Draconian legions, before this, from like 700 BC forward, you had Anunnaki trying to invade here, and they were pretty much the dominant force. You had Thoth going over into here. He was, I can never pronounce that name, Hermes Trismegistus, that's it, that's the one, Hermes Trismegistus. So that's where Thoth, after raiding Mayan, I can't remember when that happened. I have the dates in the other book, because the real detail on the history is in the book that's coming out, hopefully by the end of the year. But they were already raided by Anunnaki. When you look at the legends of Greek mythology and Roman mythology, these were all about the gods of the Roman Empire. That was an Anunnaki establishment. That was about the gods of Nibiru, Olympus, those kind of things. All of that had to do with Anunnaki history and competing parts of Anunnaki history. That's why you ended up with a Greek version and a Roman version that were a little bit different. They talked about the same people, but sometimes their names were a little bit different, and sometimes the stories were a little bit different. Well, it was at this point, Rome was an Anunnaki stronghold, and the human races and the Grail line races were under subjugation of primarily Anunnaki, but some factions of Draconian and Omicron Draconian and Odedicron reptilian races. So you had them all there, but the Anunnaki were the strong ones. Now, from 26 BC, the Roman invasion, you had Omicron Draconian legions of Orion move their Nephidim and Melchizedek Illuminati races into political power within the Ionian Empire of Italy, deposing angelic human tribe 5 of Italy completely, and of Italy and Ionian, and the exiled Celtic, Druidic, and Seminole Atlantean Magi Grail kings. So these were all the guys that were in exile down in the Italy area. You had the angelic human tribe 5 that belonged there, because Stargate 5 is, guess where? It's in Rome. Guess where? You got it. Yeah, that's just, oh my God. So they deposed angelic human tribe 5, which was pretty much on its way out, or being put into a suppression already, because from the beginning they'd been raided. But they had up there the Ionian exile. They were exiled to Ionia, which is what Italy and Greece and those areas were called in the old days. The Celtic, Druidic, and Seminole Magi Grail lines had, they were literally being chased from one place to another, trying to keep their gene lines alive. So this was the final come in and totally raid all of the Grail lines and the Tribe 5 people to get control of the territories where Stargate 5 was, so when the stellar activation cycle happened, they would be able to run their nasty stuff through the grids with no interference. Gives a whole new definition to the word mass. Okay, where's my little pointer? Yeah. At this point, my uncle would probably try to crucify me. He's a priest, bless him. My father's brother. So it's like, now I know why my grandmother passed on, I think it was 3 years ago, before she ever had to find out what I was actually teaching. Okay. So, bless her, it wouldn't have been easy for her. All right, so anyway, these guys, they created the Omicron Draconian legions through their Nephidim and Melchizedek Illuminati races. Began to create a stronghold in the Roman Empire. They began to dominate the Roman Empire. They progressively infiltrate and transpose their race identity. Again, that's a genetic thing, but it's also coming into a culture and killing anybody that doesn't cooperate forcing your belief system on them. And if you don't, if they don't teach that to their children teach it to their children, they literally exterminate them. So this is a process of forcing one's will on another civilization, if that civilization has any desire to stay alive, which the angelic humans needed to, and they knew they did. They had to, they couldn't be exterminated in the stellar activation cycle, or there'd be nobody to run the rounds the right way. So they would allow themselves to be persecuted. They would teach their children the lies, so at least their children could live to carry on and have more children. This is where you got a whole bunch of stuff of birth control not being allowed, because they needed as many little bodies with reverse coding as possible to run enough frequency to try to access the grids. This is why the Church of Rome still will not allow birth control. Why is this echoing? Yeah, why am I getting feedback on this? Anybody help? You don't know. Okay.
I'm the camera guy.
Okay.
You're talking about the Church of Rome.
Just wait, it gets better. All right, how's that? That better? Can you hear me? Okay.
Can you turn it a little bit this way? Up.
Well, then you get a little more echo as well.
Oh dear, that didn't sound good.
It's okay.
So it's not going to fall on your head, is it? Yeah. I figure in situations or in classes like this where you're learning this kind of material, any precaution you need to take as far as anything falling or flying or tripping over, it's a good idea to just pay attention. Don't give them any excuses or any ins. Yeah. Right? Really? Check the things on the lamps, right? What's nice is because we've been running the D12 frequency and higher frequencies a lot, we have a protection field around us because of that. Each one of us does personally, and the group does collectively. So that's why, I mean, if we didn't, we probably all would have been like, running for cover at this point. But we are not personally harmed at all. What's it?
You're better before than you are now as far as sound.
All right, it's too low? Like, you can't hear back there? Okay. I mean, all right, how's that? Is that happy medium? Okay, there we go, thank you. That works. What?
Down a hair.
It's feeding back again?
Just a hair.
It's not as bad as it was. Okay, how's that? That's good. Oh, okay. All righty. So you have the transposition of race identity taking place in the regions of Ionia, Italy, and Greece, and those areas. And it began the corruption of the Ionian Grail Kings line and their CDD plate spiritual teachings, because they had some of the teachings still in written form from the ancient translations of the CDD plates. So guess where some of these are still stored? Yes, you got it. This is the stuff that they'll blow it up before they let anybody find it, literally. Okay, so these distorted teachings were the foundations for the Church of Rome. The Catholic religious control dogma political machine began. 23 AD, Essene Divide. This was Galactic Federation again. Galactic Federation unites groups of Luciferian Hyksos King and Jehovian Hassa King, Anu Melchizedek's, to raid Emerald Covenant mission of the Magi Grail King Essenes, Jeshua, John the Baptist, and Miriam in Tel El Amarna, Egypt. This is where this was taking place. Tel El Amarna is where Akhenaten's place used to be, where Pharaoh Akhenaten had his place, where he had moved the capital to El Marna. Now, El Marna is a portal link. It has portals that link to the inner earth portals, and you can make it very quick. This is how they got the Ark of the Covenant up to the box, up to Ireland in the Jeshua period, because they were able to take it through the El Marna gates in the inner earth and take it back up through another gate portal that led up into Ireland. I mean, it would have been an awful long walk, if they tried to, so this was, they got it there by portals. So this area, again, was always an area that the Guardians kind of hung out in, because it was connected to, to the inner earth portal, one of the portals that you were allowed to open and close with the rod and the staff, or they would open or close on the other side for you. It was still functionally, you could use it. It was just it wasn't a Stargate, which are the vertical ones. It was just a portal, which can move between, like on a horizontal axis. And there were some of those that had remained open, through this period. So the Essene divide took place as a galactic federation. They just had their fingers in everything. These guys, I feel bad for the person who's channeling them. I really do. I mean, they have their books out and all that kind of stuff with their, they're teaching you the 12 chakra system, and they're teaching you that you have 12 DNA strands that are single heli, which, comes out to be 6 double heli strands, because they're telling you you're activating 12, but you're really only activating 6 in reverse. The person who channels these and writes the books, he doesn't know this. He has no idea that this, that this is what's going on. He doesn't know who these people are. He never asked for a resume. He was just told he was one of them. And because that's one of the seduction elements that's used here. All of a sudden you feel special because somebody out there, through there likes you and says you're important and says you're part of their team. And that's how there's manipulation done, continually here, even if you don't have the memory banks. I went through a period when probably between my teens and early 20s, where I wouldn't even talk to the guardians sometimes. Because I go, well, how do I know I can trust you? You're telling me this stuff. And they said, think about it. You don't have to talk to us if you don't want to, but just think about it. And I did, and it was the memory that did it for me. Because I remembered so many things from the time I came in. I had the movies running in my head. And nothing they had said counteracted any of that. And I knew that was me. I could feel it, like I could feel my soul, my oversoul, the whole bit. There was a knowing that was beyond belief. And that's where I learned to trust, because even at that point in my teens, with the contact that I had with the guardians, and then what the Zeta races and those guys were trying to do to make sure I didn't grow up to become a speaker, you get like, well, who do you trust? And it was through the process of having the memory, and I knew it was mine. Every ounce of me resonated with it, and the memory of ascension, where I had the memory of what it took and what technologies we used and what it felt like to go back home all the way out of density and to come back in again. It was because I had that memory to play the contact off of that I was able to begin to trust the guardians, and then the integrity of the information they were bringing through. It began to progressively get more intense and more intense, never ever contradicted itself. I did not read anything. I have a 10th grade education, right, in like American school systems. Yeah, I didn't even finish high school. I got a GED later, and then I went for about a year on a non-matriculating basis to junior college. That's the only education I have. I never had history education. I never had any kind of heavy-duty science education or anything. It became obvious that somebody knew something, because the more information that was brought through. I hadn't read a bunch of channeling books. I didn't study any Ruby Order teachings. I didn't study Run Below. I didn't know any of those things. So the stuff was coming through, and then they'd say, go to a bookstore and look for this. And then I find something that said pieces of the big amount that they give me. There'd be a book or two that had something to do with what they talked about when they talked about the word amente. And it's like, okay, it resonates. I feel that from somewhere. What was that? I know it's important. And I get the information from the plates on it. And then I say, okay, this is what we're saying. And I used to think, oh, Lord, and I have to bring this out to the world, how it's like a fiction novel that somebody wrote compared to the mainstream. Like, how are they even going to believe me? And they make me feel better by saying, go to a bookstore, look. And they'd tell me what bookstore to go to, and some part or even sometimes the whole title of what to look for. And they'd say, there, it's already partially out there. So I'd get the book and I'd read parts of it just that had to do with the information I was given. And I was amazed at how much more detail we were given than the books that were already published. So there's a progressive growing of a trust relationship. And now, you look at the cohesiveness of the teachings, everything from the healing to the universal structure, down to the political dramas, to the history. They cover all the bases. And I know my experience is valid. So it's like there's been so much manipulation that's gone down. It's hard for anybody to tell the difference right away with what you're dealing with. But I just wanted you to know that in my personal experience, I didn't just buy into the usual thing that a lot of channels trip into. I'm important now, somebody's talking to me, oh goody, I don't care who it is, where they think it's a good person, they think it's an angel, they think it's something, they believe the words they're told without having a memory reference directly and without having any larger context to play that information off of. I didn't do that, and I just wanted you to know that, because I went through my own ringer with, will I trust or won't I trust? Will I accept these, the teachings as they're coming through? Will I accept my life experience as it's coming through? I didn't have much option as far as, okay, I can reject it all and pretend I don't know any of it. I can pretend I don't remember all sorts of things that sometimes I wish I didn't as far as my other lives. But that would be self-denial. That would have been denying my whole existence and my whole experience of God being with me and my soul. So it was a process. I just wanted you to know that. All right, back to the Essene Divide. Anyway, okay. Due to the Essene Divide raids, Jeshua's Grail King Essenes were unable to fulfill the intended mission. Their mission was to disengage the Nibiru-Indadic crystal grid at Stonehenge, to disengage that program, to free Solar Stargate 4 and Earth Stargate 11, to prepare for the 2020-17 SAC. So that's what the mission really was there, aside from just bringing CDD plate translations through. The CDD plates were around because they were given back, to us at that time, because they needed to be used for some of the recoding that was going to be done. We were going to disengage the Nibiru-Indadic crystal grid so it couldn't run its reverse program anymore, which means break the link between that grid and the the transmission. You can look at it as like a current of energy between the Nibiruan thing that was anchored in Stonehenge and Battlestar Wormwood. It was like we were going to sever that current. That would at least get that thing out of the way. It was probably going to create some type of geographical instabilities, but it wouldn't have been pole shift or anything. We were supposed to get these areas secured, but because of Galactic Federation motivating these groups to rebel against the Emerald Covenant when they had agreed to participate in the Emerald Covenant, we weren't able to finish it. Let's see. The Magi Essenes had fulfilled part of the mission, part of it, by reclaiming the Rod Stargate tool and its Ark of the Covenant gold box from Galactic Federation's Noah, Abraham, Moses, Hyksos, Anu, Melchizedek Illuminati line. Okay? See those names? Those biblical names. That is their history. That is their race line names. The Noah line came out of Nohasa, Atlantis. They progressively moved up where Abraham, there's a story of Abraham Abraham and Moses is in the new book that's coming out, has like a lot more historical detail. But they were all the progression from the Atlantean Illuminati king lines all the way up through. And these were the ones that were like the affiliated with the Knights Templar. They had all of that coding in their DNA template. They were a super race where they were the ones that would be able to access the grids. Okay, so because of Galactic Federation, we weren't able to finish the whole mission, but we finished part of it because at least we got back the rod from these guys, and we got the gold box back. We'd had the staff. This is where there's part of the detail. I don't remember all of it, but it had to do with the rod is what Moses had been given to part the Red Sea thingy and to do the tablets and those kind of things, the commandment tablets, which is another story. They were the law tablets. The commandments were actually the 12 tonal sequences that were supposed to be uttered to release the security seal on the Ark of the Covenant box. And Enoch had originally done them, and then he had given the information when he went over. He had given the information to the Anunnaki so they could open the box. So the Ten Commandments is another story. Anyway, yeah, I mean, you just, after a while, you just shake your head and go, oh my God. These guys should get like whatever their highest award for fiction writing. They really deserve an award for that. All right, okay, but we couldn't recover the staff. We got the rod back, we got the box back, but we didn't get the staff back. And you needed the rod and the staff tool together to work with the plates and the signet shields. So it was still, well, got almost all of them, but don't have all the elements together to get the job done. All right. Following the failure of the intended planetary security mission, Jeshua, John, and Miriam and several Magi Grail King Essenes hid the Ark of the Covenant gold box and its rod tool in the Vale of Pusey, England, via the Tel El Amarna Inner Earth Portal Passage. So we got those things up into secure position in, what's called England, in the Vale of Pusey, England. And as we progressed up, when we get to the Arthur period, that's where we got the box, and we got Excalibur back, which means we got the staff back. And Excalibur was the sword that you would hold it. It literally was an encasement, so it didn't burn you because it was radioactive. And I mean, these tools are radioactive tools. They're, higher technologies than we have here. I remember working with the Arthur period, and I have a self there, and I was in training. This is why we wear the Excalibur. This isn't a cross, this is an Excalibur. Because the frequencies that were transmitted by the staff tool when it was held within the metal casing of the sword, you could draw in, I mean, once you got to be able to handle it where it didn't knock you on your bottom, you could literally draw in lightning bolts and literally let them energize you, and it would temporarily set your frequencies back, open your DNA temporarily, so you could get more information, so you could open your vision, and you'd have a bit more power too. You could also use it to do stuff. You could cut rock with it, you could levitate things with it, you could kill people with it if you were of that sort, but we weren't. You know, so we have a personal affiliation with Excalibur. We played with it a bit. All right, so anyway. 325 AD, we went through that earlier, the Council of Nicaea nonsense, where they pulled everything together, ripped books apart, put them back together again, invented a few stories in between, and made what was called the canonized Bible as the control dogma, political religion that would allow Rome to progressively spread its influence, because Rome and the people who were running it wanted to take over the planet. They wanted the Templar, and they were planning to get it. Out of this whole thing, you end up with Knights Templar, Knights Malta. In the contemporary version, you have part of those as the KKK, Knights, you know, those, the Ku Klux Klan Knights people. All of these Knights. That's a clue. The people that call themselves the Knights. They're all plugged in to one of the main groups. And it's like they do all sorts of wonderful things. They do hospitals, they help people, they collect money for orphans, they help countries where people are starving. They're just really lovely people. And most of the people working for them are. The people in the outer circles do not know what their high honchos know. They're not told that information. That's how the Freemasons work too. By the time you get to be like, I think it's a 33rd degree Freemason, you might know something. And what you know most of all is how to manipulate everybody else around you, especially the little people you consider cronies, because that's what they do. Little foot soldiers that you only tell them this much. This has been going on in all of these groups. I feel really badly for the people who have gotten themselves involved. Some of them are human, some of them are Illuminati. They don't know the difference, and they're being suckered into this. They're being conned, and they think they're going to get power or knowledge or at least some maybe social status or some social help in this world, because they all help each other. You know, it's like they'll give each other jobs, they'll give each other contracts over somebody that's not one of them. This game has been going on since Atlantis, literally. Yes?
How do you feel about the information given by David Icke?
I don't want to go there right now. Not on film. I have a great fondness in my heart for David Icke, let's say, on a soul level. Let's just say he could have been on the right track if he didn't take a long vacation somewhere else and doesn't want to hear about it. I have had, we've attempted to communicate, and that hasn't worked out really well, and that's okay. I respect him as a being, and I leave it at that. And no, as far as some of the information, the usual thing associated with David Icke is like the Queen Mother. Is she really a reptile that eats infants at satanic ceremonies? No, she isn't. I wouldn't say she's a guardian either, but the stuff he gets involved with, some of it, it has to do with wild goose chases. If that happens, somebody who could have really been assisting to bring out very good information can get sidetracked where they think they've got the whole picture when actually they don't. And that is kind of like the hardly any relationship that I've ever had with that person with that name as far as just communications, through like the website, I believe it was, and then one or two phone conversations that were useless. We try to point out certain things as far as, yes, you're on the right track, but there's this bigger picture. Didn't want to hear about the bigger picture.
He's what they call a useful idiot.
Oh. Oh. I would never, ever, I really wouldn't call anybody that. That 608 AD, Arthurian Grail quest. We went through that about the the Knights of the Round Table and all that, and Excalibur. And let's see, where are we? We're coming up to creation of Leviathan, and that is something that absolutely needs to be covered. Not yet. This was just the other part of the Arthur period. Okay. Now, 1244 AD, the Albigensian Crusade, Church of Rome, Nephidim, Anunnaki, Anu Melchizedek Illuminati, on behalf of the Omicron Draconian One World Order agenda. All right, Nephidim, Anu Melchizedek's working the Omicron Draconian agenda, launched a genocide campaign against the Magi Grail line Cathari. There's Cathari that were coming up from the Anunnaki line, but also ones that were the original ones, which were the Cathari. And they were our Grail lines, that they were descended directly from Jeshua, from the Jeshua line. Okay, so they launched a genocide campaign against them, and against the Cathari, and the Tribe 12 people. Now, Tribe 12 would go with Stargate 12. Stargate 12 is in southern France, in the Montségur area of southern France. So they were the guardians of that gate. The campaign was initiated to stop the Cathari from using the round table knowledge, because they still had parts of it, to disengage the Nibiru Dadic crystal grid. So they were trying to get this grid down because it had failed in the other period, so they were still trying. Okay. Knowledge gained from CDD plate, they had, to disengage Nibiru Dadic crystal. They'd also got after them because, wait a minute, there's something to do with, I'm remembering something from the other thing, and I want to see how it fits in here from the other book. Okay, they also had CDD plate 12. The Cathari had CDD plate 12 in their possession, and they were being, translating it to get the round table knowledge so they could go and finish the mission. CDD plate 12, the Catholic Church people, the Dracs, found out about it, that it was on planet, and they went after them because they wanted to get it. It was considered an Atlantean relic that they were hunting down. It's a relic, all right. All right, okay. And it was in possession of the Cathari at the time. The Cathari's last stand was at Montségur in southern France, an event historically recorded as the Albigensian Crusades, in which the Cathari were cornered and burned alive at the order of the Church of Rome, and accomplices in the government of France. So there were direct, government infiltration in France also. A small group of Cathari escaped with CDD plate 12 and with numerous volumes of pure Jeshua Essene records, which were hidden in France and remain to this day, to eventually provide witness to the realities of the Atlantean conspiracy. So they are there. The records are still there, and they are under very high security. I have no idea where there, but when the time comes, they will bear witness to the things that are being taught now and to what has gone on here. That time may be around 2017. I don't know. That may be a time when things have changed an awful lot on this planet. Okay, 1500, I'm sorry.
Does that have anything to do with the Dead Sea Scrolls being uncovered and the rewriting of the Bible?
The Dead Sea Scrolls are a riot because you don't know which group did them, because everybody was making up stories to counteract other stories and to hide true stories. So parts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, I think most of them are coming from the Hyksos line, the Anunnaki lines, but some of them are coming from Drac lines, so they're not all by the same people. And none of them, from what I've been told, have any of the information of the original Essene teachings. These were when the Essene divide happened, when the Hyksos and all those guys who had part Essene coding from the earlier bioregenesis things that they were doing through, like Solomon and those guys, when they divided again, they weren't in the Emerald Covenant, the Essene groups, or Anunnaki Essenes, went in one direction, and they're part of the ones that were involved with Dead Sea Scrolls. Their lineage would be involved with Dead Sea Scrolls. So you're not going to find a whole lot of anything coherent that puts pieces together there, but it will help to weave their story. You watch. They'll be, as these things get found and they'll get translated, they will be used in order to try to justify the biblical history story, which was part of the plan all along on their side. Yeah, but so far they have not told me that any of them belong to us, and it's either that none of them do, or that there's some there that, if that was known right now, something bad would happen to them, or they're not found yet, or something would happen to us or something because we knew about it. So it's either on security clearance, and there might be some connection to, our stuff, or it's completely, none of it is our stuff. So that's like one of those, well, we'll wait and see. If I've been given any information on Dead Sea Scrolls that belong to us, it will eventually go in the books. Okay. All right. 1500 AD, Amica Crusade. All right, the quest for the Holy Grail continues as the Hyksos Knights Templar Anu Melchizedek Illuminati races and the Omicron Draconian Nephidim Anu Melchizedek Illuminati races advance their One World Order agenda in pursuit of the Holy Grual, the Grual Point. which is Stargate 2, the central control point for Earth's Templar, and both competing groups intended to hold dominion over the lands of the Gruel Point when the stellar activation cycle arrived. The Protestant and Catholic invasion of Native American tribes began. The divisions that happened here, they both began to use the same books, all right, the same records of the falsified canonized Bible, and they used that because it had been spread and, you know, pushed around so much. It was now a very powerful political control mechanism. So the Anunnaki races went into doing Protestant translations in rebellion against the Catholic translations, which were the draconian translations. So here again, in the Protestant and Catholic division, you are seeing Anunnaki agenda and draconian agenda. And you're seeing various fragments of each of those also happening. It's been progressively all through our known history. And both of them came over to invade the American tribes. We talked about that because there was attempts being made to bring back the CDD plate teachings and oral tradition. So they went after the tribes that were in North America and the Inuit tribes that were in Canada that were being given the information, and then they went down and they raided the tribes that were also in South America. Okay, let's see. Okay. The name America came from the name of one of the Emerald Covenant Magi Grail lines known as the Amika, who were protectors of the Gruel Point. The Gruel Point was known to exist in the lands of the North American continent, a territory once held by Atlantis. Guided through mystical secret societies set up by their respective fallen angelic kin, competing groups of Anu Melchizedek Illuminati races launched a progressive infiltration and takeover of the North American continent, each intended to destroy the exiled Lemurian and Native Seminole and Amika Native American Magi Grail Line tribes and the Inuit tribes from up here. They didn't talk about anything about Canada until we got here, which is very characteristic sometimes. We go to a place, and that's when the memory of the grids is given to us. Okay, let's see. So they wanted to literally destroy the race lines there to stop them from preparing people through oral tradition to know what to do when the Great Cleansing came. And that's where a lot of the Hopi prophecies and all those things were coming through. Okay. Okay. Okay, because the tribes were being taught to run the round table, so they would be ready. They were being taught. This is where, you know how you picture like a lot of the indigenous groups, they'd do their dances around the fireplaces and stuff. Yeah, this was not random dancing. And before it got corrupted, it wasn't trance dancing or any weird stuff. They originally were running rounds, as were the people in Hawaii, the original people in Hawaii who were doing hula dances. They were doing Merkaba when they originally started. They were using the sariyas with the hands, and they were using the hips to move the Merkaba. All of these things have the tradition that goes, like these traditions go right back into what was once the sacred knowledge of the Templar. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, so America was founded by the Luciferian Hyksos Knights Templar, Anu Melchizedek Illuminati, who now go by the name of Freemasons, on behalf of Galactic Federation and the Pleiadian, Nibiru, and Anunnaki races of the 9560 BC Luciferian Covenant. Competing Illuminati groups and their stellar co-conspirators intended to use the North American Gruel Point and their holdings of Stargate 11 in Europe, Stargate 4 Egypt, and Stargate 10 in the Middle East to gain full control of Templar, of Earth's Templar, on behalf of their stellar contacts. They were going to do this during the stellar activation cycle we're in the middle of right now. It was anticipated by all that the final conflict drama and the Battle of Armageddon would take place as the competing Draconian and Anunnaki descendant Anu Melchizedek human Illuminati legions began to battle it out for control of Earth's Templar during the long-awaited stellar activation cycle. Neither side anticipated that there would be enough surviving angelic human tribes and Magi races left with knowledge to run the round tables to prevent the Illuminati, known as the Leviathan Force, which the Illuminati collectively is called the Leviathan Force. They didn't think there'd be enough of us left to stop them from succeeding in their one world order agenda. So they figured they just had to fight with each other because they'd already gotten rid of us by then. You know, the true human gene codes and the indigo gene codes. And even if they didn't get rid of all of us, they would have had us under total brainwashing where we wouldn't have any information about the rounds or any of it. So we would just actually help them to fulfill their agendas. Okay? All right, wait a minute. Okay, included in this One World Order agenda was the reinitiation of contact with the fallen angelic ET legions as the SAC drew closer. The fallen angelics intended to slowly make their presence known, then come in to stake their claim as the stellar activation cycle approached 2012 AD. The first contact was done through channeling. It started, I believe, in about sometime in the 1700s when Galactic Federation started to actually make contact, but they didn't call themselves that then. So literally, we have been set up. The New Age movement was a setup, and it was run under lip service to Christ consciousness and to a false unity consciousness that was just meant to literally create a group of lemmings they could lead right off, the cliff into Phantom Matrix. Okay. The fallen angelics intended to slowly make their presence known and stake their claim once the stellar activation cycle came. And originally it was around 2012 that they were planning to stake their claim, to let themselves be known that they were here as ETs. The Draconian, Reptilian, Centaurian descent and Melchizedek Illuminati races attempted but failed to claim world dominion over their Anunnaki adversaries via their representative, Hitler, in World War II. Both Illuminati forces have been competing for political world dominion. This is where we end up in America, at least, with the bipartisan system where you have Democrats and Republicans, you have Anunnaki and you have Dracs. And they don't know that. The people who are part of these parties don't know that. They're caught up in the political machine. They don't think there's anything bigger or greater. So they focus all their energy into the manipulation of the outer level of the machine, where all their energies and their attentions are totally drained, and now they're all being channeled into TV time, where we're all learning to live in the virtual reality hologram within our heads that's just projected out into the little screen, where nothing is real to people anymore except TV and politics and paying taxes and the job. Talk about a brainwash job. They did a good job of it. Okay. Yeah, the Democrat has historically been the Anunnaki Illuminati, and Republican has historically, at least in this country, it may have been a little different the way those parties work in Europe, but Republican was Drac here. They're all Drac agenda races. And then literally, we had this even in the Civil War period in the United States, where the Southern Dracs were fighting the Northern Yankee Anunnakis, so the rebel Dracs and the Yankee Anunnakis. And the people that get caught up in this on the outside have no idea. They identify with the words that were put on these things, never having any idea what it's connected to behind that. Most people don't even know that Dracs and Anunnaki exist. Okay, let's see. Don't worry, I know this is depressing, but by the end of it all, we'll feel good again, because it's not that hard to solve, but it's helpful to understand what you're trying to solve. Okay. Both Illuminati forces have been competing for world dominion. They have been the predominant hidden source of war, race hatreds, and territorial, financial, and religious competition behind and within world governments until the September 12, 2000 United Resistance Alliance. So they've been fighting with each other through, literally for centuries, who's going to control what. But September 12th, 2000 is when the United Intruder Resistance was formed, when you had Anunnaki races that didn't like the Dracs, Dracs didn't like the Anunnakis, and you had the Andromi races, the Necromaton Andromi in between. They have a bunch of hybrids. One of them is a Nephilim hybrid. This particular group of the Andromi Necromaton, which are the beetle people, hybrids are Nephilim beetle people hybrids. They're the Archangel Michael Matrix people. All right, that's who Archangel Michael is. You're sent holograms of angelic contact through the Nibiru and Diodic crystal grid system that they access. And this is the grid system that we've learned about since we've been up here, because there's a huge control matrix for it running right across Canada, and it can be healed. And when it's healed, the people who have been plugged into this mind control matrix will begin to be able to start pulling some of their own Christos frequency in. They'll still have a battle on their hands because they're implanted. These are implants in the DNA templates. Once you begin to work with these frequencies and you allow them into your body, they stay. And there's ways to clear them. The D12 frequency can break them up. It doesn't happen overnight. But the people who decide that they, absolutely hate our work and can't stand us because we said something that wasn't nice about Archangel Michael and his agendas, they have a chance of coming around. It won't be immediately, but in the next year or so, you may find some of the same people that'll be upset with you and not like you anymore, or try to make you believe the other way because now you believe something different. You might find in a year or a year and a half, they may start to shift, because they'll start to get clearer frequencies coming in. And the frequencies are going to have coming in are going to be more D12 frequencies, because the same grids that are being used to broadcast the holograms right now and the implanting can be used to broadcast the divine blueprint. And that's part of what we're going to do with our roundtable. Okay, so anyway, let's see. Okay, so this takes us up to the United Resistance. This is 1750 is when the Nibiruans did their reacquaintance, where Galactic Federation began remote channeling. That's when their chosen ones were being activated, the implants in their DNA templates. In 1916, the Zeta races, actually between 1903 and 1916, the Zeta races on behalf of the Draconian agenda started to come in, and this gets into another section of the new material that has been, that we've put in, that has been given since this time. There's a whole bunch more interesting things that happen through this period that have to do with wormholes. Wormholes. Remember I talked about 10,500 BC, the Luciferian conquest, when there were attempts made to poke holes in that wall in time from 5.5 million years ago to open the matrix, to open Earth's shields to the phantom Earth's shields, because there's a place called phantom Earth. It's the part of Earth's grids that got sucked into phantom matrix in 5.5 million years ago during the electric wars. And that wall in time was there to protect it from bringing the rest of the grids in, giving us time, giving the founders time, so we could correct the divine blueprint enough to bring that back out of the matrix. That has been why this wasn't solved earlier. We were trying to get the part of Earth's grids and a few other planets up there that had been sucked into the matrix, part of them sucked in, trying to bring them back over and restore their divine blueprint so the matrix could be healed, so the matrix itself could be healed, which means the races who lived in it could be healed. The Anunnakis and the Dracs and all those guys who were doing really nasty things. There was, for ages and ages, a real desire and belief that they could be healed. There still is. But right now, the healing mission has to change. It's going to be assigned to another matrix, and they're not going to be allowed to come back into this one when this is over. Because if that matrix is allowed to stay open in here, it's reached such a critical mass level, it's going to take our matrix into it. So this is now considered a time matrix in crisis, where it's actually going to get frequencies, like stabilizing frequencies from a stronger time matrix that is like a future evolution of this time matrix where things went well, where it's running on its divine blueprint, while the phantom matrix is going to get hosted into another time matrix that is much more rigid as far as the rules are not as liberal. Free will is still there, but it operates the way they've been operating. Where basically the ones who are doing dominion are going to find themselves in a hierarchical structure. And if that's what they want to play, if they want to be hierarchical to others, they will find themselves living in that structure. So maybe they can learn and evolve to the point where they don't want to do that anymore. And then there will be attempts to bring them through another rescue team, thank God it's not ours, into, wholeness through that matrix. So that's what's going down here. They're not sealing them off and, sentencing them to destruction. They're simply saying they cannot be allowed to compromise this time matrix anymore, or it's going to take everybody down, including the healers that were sent in to try to help them. So that can't be allowed to happen. So there's a whole bunch of information that I would rather cover this when we get into the new material that was just brought in, because it gives much more detail. I can recap it really quick. Between 1903 and 1916, the Zetas came in because in 10,500 BC, there were two wormholes that were made into the Phantom Matrix. They were made in Atlantis, and these two wormholes were capped. A frequency cap was put on. They couldn't be fully repaired, but they were capped, so they were not open again by the Guardian races. Between 1903 and 1916, the Zetas came in from Phantom Earth, and they finally figured out a way to blow the caps off one of the wormholes. It was their wormhole, the one that they had made back in the Atlantean period in 10,500 BC, and it was called the Falcon wormhole. The Falcon wormhole was only one. There was another one that had been made in that period too. It was called the Phoenix wormhole, and that was the Anunnakis wormhole. That was connected to Nibiru, where the other one was connected to Phantom Earth. These two wormholes, eventually when we get into the new material, there are maps. We'll show you where they are. And these hold the secrets of what was going on with the Philadelphia experiment in 1943, the Montauk Project in 1983, and a whole bunch of other things that has culminated in the Trade Center trigger event. That is saying that event meant this field is now in motion. It meant game's on. We were told game was on in our Labor Day workshop, and it came through as a surprise. It wasn't anything written. It was given like directly where Ma is kind of like hanging over my shoulder saying, okay, it's this, okay, and I'm, literally, telling people what I'm being told. We were told on September 3rd that the game was on, and that the Illuminati were taking a big step forward. They didn't say exactly what it was, but they said it's time that we start to prepare ourselves. That's when they started giving us the VECA codes, where we could begin working with the VECAs, because they could bring in more frequency and clear our radio bodies very fast, because we were all going to be in danger. They also said that there were events that were going to be happening in the political arena that were going to progressively move the agenda forward, with the One World Order agenda forward. That agenda, now that the United Resistance has formed, which is, the ones competing are now ganging up together to try to take control, their ideal is to create World War III, to get rid of certain amounts of the populations and to clear some of the real estate in certain areas, and then to progressively move us toward, at some point, if they have their way, there would be a landing. You'd probably find the Vatican telling us that God created ETs too, and then it would go through the governments. This would be later. This would be closer to 2008. There was about 5 different dates when they were planning to do that little one. And because of the grid work the Guardians have been doing, it's hung up their thing. Because of the information we've been releasing, it's put little niches in their original plans. So anywhere, really, between 2003 and 2008, there may be some very interesting revelations in the skies. But right now, it works to their advantage to keep undercover, to make it look like ETs aren't here. Then it's all, nobody pays attention to any of this. What they were going to bring it to the point was they were going to make their presence known. Hi, we're your creator gods. Come and help us. They were going to teach us the secrets of the Templar and how to do round tables in reverse, but they weren't going to tell you that. And once we opened the grids for them, once we dropped the code so they could beam stuff directly into the core template, they knew just by doing it with the frequencies that they were using, it would make the place roll, get rid of us. They were just going to use the humans. These people that are following these matrices, Archangel Michael and all those guys, they don't realize it. They're the lemmings. It's not just the human races. They are literally being used as a vessel, as a tool, through which certain frequencies can be dropped here, and after that they are considered expendable. And it's really, really sad because they're told, oh, beloveds, we love you so much. We've missed you. We're your galactic family. We're so glad you'll be coming home. Oy, that stuff. Just, it makes you want to cry and scream at the same time. Like, how could anybody be so nasty to do that when they know what they're doing here. They're doing it of free will choice, and they don't care. I hope that the people that are caught up in those traps start to wake up. And if we are successful in the progressive series of grid work that we're doing, because this isn't the last stop by any means, this is going to go on until 2011. If we're successful, all right? If the Guardians aren't successful by the end of 2003 with certain things that we'll talk about like later this afternoon, there would be a switch to Plan B, which would be teaching people how to get their DNA activated really fast, how to work with their Merkabas, how to make contact with the Iani, so you can start to, I think one of the first things they would do would begin to show you, like reveal, activate in your DNA, your soul records, so you'd start to be able to remember your own history. And they would train evac teams, and that would be the Regent Consulate program that they asked us to introduce recently. It was supposed to be introduced in 2006, but because of things that are happening now, the Regent Consulates would be the ones that were the first ones invited to come in. They'd be taught how. They'd have an escort through gates, and they would be taught in Inner Earth what to do to help get groups of people out, and if it went that bad. Now, we're planning on it not going that bad. All right? That would be unfortunate. It doesn't have to do that. If we're successful in the work that we do, it'll not only heal the planetary grids and stop them from putting it into pole shift, it'll also begin the healing of the races, because the frequencies will be able to come through what has been blocking them. It's been like a frequency fence in their DNA, in everybody's DNA. But it will progressively help them to clear the implants that have been kept, they've been used like puppets. So we have a bright future, and it's still not decided. We still don't know. You can't tell by the vibration of where this moment point is which probable future we're going to line up with. But we know which one we're aiming for. The peaceful one, the solution one.
Soul records. If you soul records, instead of name with soul contracts, because I know some people work with soul contracts.
We all have soul contracts.
Yeah, those soul contracts.
We have soul contracts, we have oversoul contracts, we have avatar contracts, we have rishi contracts, and we have ascended master contracts.
You harm by changing the soul contracts, going there and renegotiating the contract and stuff?
You can at any moment, once you become aware of one, renegotiate it if you're working a Christos template. It's not like you're signed, sealed, delivered, you've got to do that even if you don't want to anymore. It works the other way with the Anunnaki and Draconian spiritual teachings. If you've got a contract, they're going to hold you to it whether you want to be in it or not. And you were probably tricked into it in the first place. So soul contract stuff, that's very real. And we all have it. But the thing is, our soul contracts are stored right in our DNA. All right, they're literally in our templates, they're in our Cathara grids. So as we begin to activate our own systems, run more Maharata frequency, we'll progressively be bringing that knowledge more and more to our awareness. We'll start to get memory with it in pieces, and it comes in pieces at first. It doesn't always come in movies. It takes a while to sequence those codes to get the linear format. But you will open your own soul contracts. You don't need somebody to give them to you. But what can help is have somebody transmit frequency that knows exactly which parts of your template are holding the information that you most need to know right now, and they can help you by transmitting that. The Iani will do that. They've done that with me since I was small, so I could begin to sequence all the pieces I had floating around of memory. So there's a lot on soul contracts. We could do like a whole workshop on soul contracts. So it's kind of like out of the realm of where I can go right now without having to do another day of this workshop. But we do have them. Everybody has them. And some of them are good, where they're Christos. Others are ones we got ourselves into during this messy history that we've had just to keep ourselves alive on planet to help keep the gene code alive. And they're the ones that we're at the point where everybody has a choice. If we have contracts that are encoded in their DNA as well, that were with some of the fallen angelic matrices that were made under times of duress, when it was either, make them or literally a whole collective is going to go down with you. Many of the guardians had, both the Iani groups, the indigos, and the humans made these kind of deals. At this point, this is the time when the information's being brought back, we're being offered a free will choice. We can choose which path we want to be on, and if we have any soul contracts from the other sides, we relinquish them. We literally say, I stand against this now. I do not want to fill this contract, and I will no longer. And you do it with the Song of Lyra. All right? Now, the Song of Lyra just activates that frequency. But when you put an intention behind that, like, I no longer want this soul contract or any implants or anything in my DNA that has to do with it, if it's a negative one, and you make that command, you command that intention, and then run your Song of Lyra, your D12 frequency, get yourself with a burst of your D12 in the body, it will start to literally break the connections to whatever matrix has a connection to you. So the Song of Lyra has many, many uses.
You can do a blanket clear then, right? You can do a blanket clear of all the stuff.
Yeah, but there's a lot of levels to it because the stuff keeps coming up. Every little piece of code you activate in your DNA template has another little piece of twist to it. So it's a progressive. It's like having to wash your car every 10 minutes. It's a pain in the neck in manual terms. Like, oh no, I don't have to do that again. I just cleaned that. It's like you take a shower and you smell 5 minutes later. It's like, come on. But it won't always be that way. The more D12 frequency is running through the planetary grids, the more the planet itself will help you to do that. The more we get our Merkaba spinning in the right direction, the more it will set that in the planetary field, and the more roundtables we do between us running our Merkabas personally in the right direction and running roundtables in the right direction, they pack huge amounts of power. Eventually, we'll get the Merkaba back to its natural spin. At that point, a transmutation process will start working on its own using the Akasha code, which is a Vecca code that was introduced in the Cathara workshop. It's also, in the information, in case people weren't at the Cathara workshop, it's in the 51 pages too, some of the stuff that was given new. That will begin setting in, if you use that for a while, the Akasha technique, it will begin to set in motion an auto-clearing cycle, where there'll be enough frequency that stays active in the DNA template, where you don't have to, like check your Cathara grid every 5 minutes, like, oh no, another black spot, bleh, get rid of that, where's my Mahart frequency? It'll begin to set in an auto-clear cycle, but not only in us, in the planetary grids as well. Okay, so anyway, all right, what time is it? Okay, less than 2 hours to dinner break. Wait a minute, let me see my watch. 4. Okay. Yeah, I think I'm going to go in. I'm going to save these guys because there's much more detail on them that is pertinent to what we need to know for what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to save these for when we go into more of the, the more sophisticated material, the newer material. Now, Yeah, no, which is,
Yeah, I think it's still in his stuff.
no, they're still, this is one of the new pages that, these were run up for people too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. Straighten out.
Well, okay. Illuminati race origins, creation of the Leviathan force. Now that we know some of the things these beings have been up to, where the heck did they come from? You know, we know, I've mentioned enough times, that they were bioregenesis redemption contracts for fallen angelic races, where they were given the privilege to have their template combined with certain elements of the human template in order that they could begin to evolve something that had 12 subharmonics in each strand, so they could evolve eventually a full 12-strand pattern to get the Christos imprint back. Now, this is where and when and how that happened here. These hybridization programs have been going on since the Lyr and Elohim Wars 250 billion years ago, where anything that was from the Phantom Matrix that fell, that wanted to come back over, that wanted to enter the Emerald Covenant and be peaceful, and you know, go back into the Joy imprint, into the Law of One, they would be assisted in getting their templates fixed, because they couldn't get out of the Phantom Matrix once their templates had full reversals. They had to literally progressively reverse the reversals back to the divine blueprint. So that's what the bioregenesis technologies were doing for them, the template restructuring or reordering, regenerating, new beginning for the template. That's why it's a regenesis. Okay? Now, the Illuminati human races are human hybrids inhabited by fallen angelic identities, identities whom originally entered the Christos Emerald Covenant on bioregenesis redemption contracts to regain their 12-strand DNA Christos potentials, then defected from the Emerald Covenant in favor of fallen angelic anti-Christic agendas. Some of the Illuminati races are actually ones that didn't personally defect. They were tricked into defection, and then they ended up under possession by the fallen angelic collectives they were trying to escape from. And what's interesting, and what's really sad, it's the Illuminati races that have been doing the dirty work of the fallen angelics on this planet. The fallen angelic collectives, just for those guys to have been in form, to get in a human form, meant they had to make a stand against their fallen angelic collective and agree to do the Emerald Covenant. That's how they got in these body forms. Because of that, their fallen angelic matrices don't forgive and forget. They have used them and abused them, and eventually, once they're done with them, they don't want them back. They consider them completely expendable. They want to walk them through gates that they're not prepared to walk through, so they literally fragment their templates and go back to space dust. So the Illuminati that think they're serving something higher that's going to give them power or recognition or safety or anything, they are being tricked because they are despised, because once upon a time, they made a choice to enter the Emerald Covenant, and that wasn't forgotten by those who stand against the Emerald Covenant. So they're actually more vulnerable than the indigo or the human races, because there's a vendetta against them by their fallen angelic matrices. They'll trick them into anything, but they're going to show them. They're going to show them, you're going to betray me? That's the attitudes most of them have. So anyway, here's where it all started the last time around on Earth for seeding 3 of the angelic humans. We've been on the planet for quite a while. Seeding 3 started in, 798,000 BC. There's a lot of stuff that took place before this time, wars, those kind of things. Now, 250,000 BC, Locus Neanderthal. You know what we call Neanderthal man? Those bones and things that they found. They were called the Locus. At this point in time, the Anunnaki races of Nibiru were raiding the planet. They were raiding the planet for gold, because they use elemental gold to create a certain condition in their atmosphere that allows them to artificially sustain for long periods, like close to an immortal body. And their atmosphere depletes of this substance that requires elemental gold in order to keep replenishing it. So there was a period of time where they were doing major raids on the planet to mine gold, literally. They were mining gold, and they were particularly in the regions of like Africa, and down in those regions, Africa, up through Egypt, all, you know, what was Samaria, all those areas. And this was way before like Sumerian civilization or any of those things, or at least the third seeding Sumerian civilization. Now, the Nibiruan aquatic ape, these are aquatic ape Nibiruans. When I say Nibiruans, they are a type of Anunnaki that are Anu Seraphim. You have two basic types of Anunnaki. Anu Elohim, which are the Jehovians. They are the bipedal dolphin people. They were the original Anunnaki strains. Then you have some of them that combined with the fallen Seraphim, Draconian, or Reptilian matrices, and they created an Anu-Seraphim Anunnaki race line. The Nibiruans are Anu-Seraphim. Now, the Anu-Seraphim race lines, one of their strains is an aquatic ape hominid form. That was their original form. And this is where Darwinian theory picks up and gets twisted into human reality. The Nibiruan aquatic ape form, which was the Nibiruan imprint. You had the Enki family line from Nibiru, of Anunnaki from Nibiru. You had the Enlil family line of Anunnaki from Nibiru. You had the Marduk family line of Anunnaki from Nibiru. You had, each of those were a different hybrid type of Anu-Seraphim, but they all lived together on Nibiru and various other areas. Well, they all came in together. This is where your Sumerian god stories come from, with Enki, Enlil, Marduk, and all those dudes. All right, this was their family names, this tonal resonance of their family names. These guys came in to harvest gold from Earth and to begin speculating as to getting control of the grids again, because they never gave up the quest. They were on planet for quite some time in this period, and they're progressively moving into like down from, they came in like in Egypt and in, they also came in simultaneously in South America, like the Yucatan and down through South America. So they actually came in both areas, and different groups of them came in, like the Enki group would be here and then the Enlil group would be there. There started to be this war situation happening among them, because the one group, and I believe it was the Toth Enki group, and that we say Toth Enki because that is the family line the Toth is out of. They are the Enki Zephelium, as Zephelium is like the original race strain that the Zeta races came out of. So we had wars going on between them. They were starting to get mad at each other because the Enki group the Toth Enki group had to do all the mining, and they didn't like mining. They were doing the physical labor. These were guys who considered themselves gods. They didn't like to do that. The Enlil groups were doing more of the like management type things, and this was not going over well with the Enki groups. So they had this whole period where they started to fight with each other, and they solved that fight by deciding they'd create a slave race, something that would do their bidding and could do the hard work. What they did was they took their own aquatic ape, Nibiruan Anunnaki imprint, and they combined it with certain elements of certain Earth primates. It wasn't even apes, it was certain types of monkey that were on Earth, and they combined those templates. The primate hominid was created. This was created by the Enki, Enlil, and Marduk. They all decided, okay, we'll put our templates into this and create this thing we can use in order to do our hard labor. This is where it started. This was not Emerald Covenant. This was not a biogenesis program. This was let's create something to exploit because we don't like to do our own housekeeping stuff. Okay? So they created a slave race. It was a primate hominid. That's what we're calling Neanderthal here. They were called the Locust. Okay, down in around the same period, 246,000 BC, not too much, not too much, too far away from that. The Toth Enki collective and Enoch's Jehovian Anunnaki collective, they entered the Emerald Covenant for an Anunnaki bioregenesis hybridization program redemption contract. So you had these two things happening, and there was like that's a good place to start. It's got Anunnaki coding. We can take it from there. It's already on Earth. So certain members of this race, the Locust Neanderthal, were entered into the bioregenesis program. This is where they entered the Emerald Covenant, and this is where Toth and Enoch both entered Emerald Covenant. Toth was appointed the guardian or custodian of the races that would be of the Anu-Seraphim souls that were in them, the ones that what this new race line would become. The Toth ones would have the Nibiruan souls and the ones that were Anu-Seraphim, Anunnaki souls, and some of the Draconian souls and Reptilian souls were under Toth's charge. Enoch's group were the pure strain Jehovian Anunnaki souls, because they tended not to like each other. So they're saying, okay, each go in your own evolutionary path, and we can get you both out of here. You don't have to keep fighting with each other. So here's where Toth and Enoch and Toth enter into the picture. In this period, they had entered first, literally through some hierarchical structures here on Nibiru, and Enoch, he actually had ascended once, and he had come back down through the Anunnaki matrix in order to do this job, and then he got hung up with it once he came back down. Toth hadn't ascended. He was a more evolved Anunnaki in the sense where he was starting to consider that maybe how they were running their race was wrong. Maybe he was starting to question the Anu Elohim and whether they were right or not. So there was a whole story that how these guys themselves, as individuals, got involved with being appointed as the overseers of races. They went through bioregenesis. Thoth went through bioregenesis to get to the point where he had nearly a cleared DNA strand template, and he got it all reversed again. Enoch literally had been ascended through whatever his life frame had been in another time matrix. He saw what was going on here and chose to come back. I mean, his avatar chose to come back in as the being called Enoch, who would take charge of the Anunnaki, Jehovian Anunnaki evolution, so they could get out of the phantom matrix. And it was all part of the Christos realignment mission. The more of them you can get out, the better. Because each one of the fallen ones were originally a part of this matrix. And each place that doesn't, each person that gets lost and fragmented leaves a hole in frequency in the divine fiber of our time matrix. So they will always make efforts to get them back in. So Thoth and Enoch got involved with it at this level. Now, this is where the decisions were made here, and this is where Thoth and Enoch began the process of getting into their body. Well, he was already in his body, but getting themselves to the point where they went through enough bioregenesis of their own templates that they could plug into both the Christos frequencies and the anti-Christos frequencies to be able to hold them so they could then be a host matrix for the fallen angelic ones, where the fallen angelic ones could literally end up with their DNA plugged into the templates of these two beings, and then because these two beings could hold the frequency also of almost a full Christos template, they would be able to pull them back through. It was a host matrix bioregenesis program. It started into manifestation 155,000 BC. These guys are still roaming around being abused on the planet by the other guys. All right, 155,000 BC, stage one began. The locusts were taken, and they became the Luhari, which was Cro-Magnon 1. They took the Hibernian Anunnaki gene code. The Hibernian Anunnaki were born of seeding 2 raids. They were not originally supposed to be there either, but from human seeding 2, when the Anunnaki were raiding, there was a race line created called the Hibernians. And the Hibernians were, some of them had entered Emerald Covenant. So they took the Hibernian gene code that already had a bit of human from seed 2 and Anunnaki in it. They took that and they combined it with human, wait a minute, I'm going to go here. Do I have the Hibernian Anunnaki plus human hybrid from, yeah, okay, plus human hybrid from seeding 2. Okay, plus locus. All right, so this here, they took the Hibernian imprint from seeding 2, and that was like the hybrid human. So they took the hybrid template from seeding 2 from the ones who had entered Emerald Covenant during something called the 1,000 Years' War, which ended with the Treaty of El Anu, where some of them came into the Emerald Covenant. They combined the human imprint with the locus Neanderthal. This way, this imprint gained human strand, DNA strand template 1. All right, so that's where they had their template there. Strand 1 human, third seeding human, was imbued into their strand. So they literally have a set of double strands. They have one running in a reverse matrix, and they have the other running, the human strand, running in the forward right sequence. And the process is, because the human strand can run more frequency because it's not distorted and it has 12 codes instead of 11 or 10, eventually through activation and through evolution, through the time cycles, the human strand will progressively have more frequency, so it will overpower the reversal, bringing it back to the right mathematical sequence. So they're literally evolving the DNA, through an evolutionary cycle. All right, so we went from stage 1 was locus to Luhari. That's where we went from Neanderthal to Cro-Magnon, and they gained DNA strand template 1. 152,000 BC, stage 2. The Luhari to what's called the Iluli Levi, the Iluli tribe of Levi. Go back to the Bible again. Okay, this was Cro-Magnon 2. They combined the Luhari with what's called the Ur-Antrian, Urtite cloister human. That's one of the human races in the third seeding. Okay, plus the Luhari, they gained DNA strand template 2 here, so they have 1 and 2 now. These were the first that were capable of natural procreation with humans, with the humans of seeding 3. The others could not carry, you couldn't combine them, but for natural procreation, if you were going to create a race line with them or a baby with them, you'd have to do it in a petri dish, and even that usually didn't work because there were too many differences between the reversals in, the saturation of reversals in their gene code compared to what a human's forward, mathematical sequences were. So here, they began to pick up enough forward coding where they could procreate. This created chaos. They knew it was a risk, but I think they underestimated it, because that meant that if somebody could get a hold of these that wasn't nice, and combine them, like they could literally make them rape an angelic human woman, they could impregnate that woman with their code, which meant they could have they could create a baby in an angelic human woman, which normally would only be able to be accessed. The fetal pattern could only be integrated by an angelic human soul or an indigo soul. But when you had those reversals combined in the fetal pattern DNA template, it left windows where, if you moved quick and you were from a fallen angelic matrix, you could bounce out the natural line of a soul trying to integrate, and you could literally start getting fallen angelic souls into highly coded hybrid bodies. And that's what started to happen. It started to happen immediately, but it got progressively worse and worse and worse. But it was like in the middle of it, and it was almost like once you start it, you had to get through to the next level, because that might hold the ability to fix what went behind it. So it became a fiasco very quickly. There were wars and things that took place between various races. So like one would start to phase out, where the souls wouldn't incarnate into that form anymore, and the last remaining ones would kind of like die off, and they would give them a chance to come in to the next level of the hybridization. Like what used to be the souls were in here would be given the opportunity to incarnate into the next evolutionary cycle, so they could progress as well. Okay, now 152,000 BC, this is where the Luhari Levi started. These were first the Anu Seraphim Anunnaki souls that were under Thoth's custodianship. So they started coming in 152,000 BC. That was stage 2. They came in when strand 2, human strand 2, was integrated into the template. 151,000 BC, stage 3. They were called the Iluli. They went from Iluli Levi to Iluli Judah, the tribes of Judah. Cro-Magnon 3. Or Homo sapien almost one. Yeah, it was like, a stage kind of in between them. All right. These were a combination of the Iluli Levi from the stage before with what was called the Brenoa Urtite Cloister human race. They picked up strand 3 here. The Anu Seraphim, Draconian, Reptilian, and Zeta souls would enter this form under Thoth's custodianship still. Enoch's coming into the picture soon, and this is where it went absolutely crazy. 148,000 BC, stage 4. The Iluli Judah were upgraded to Iluli Nephi, Homo sapien 2, or Homo sapien almost 2, because we're still working on that. Well, if we consider this Homo sapien, they weren't there yet. They were still more, more primate. And they had different shapes. I mean, different chromosome contents, all that stuff would be different with these changing in the DNA strand templates. So the tribes of Nephi, this became an absolute fiasco. The tribes of Nephi were created in 148,000 BC. They started, took Iluli Judah, and combined it with the template for the Hibiru, Urtite Cloister human race. They picked up from the Hibiru strand 4. Now Hibiru and Hebrew are not the same thing. A Hebrew is actually a mixed cloister race. It's highly coded. It had, highly coded with Christos frequencies when it's running in the right order. A Hebrew person is a person who has a gene code. It is a gene strain. It has Hibiru plus what's called Melchizedek, Essim. All right, so the Melchizedek cloister plus Hibiru cloister equals Hebrew, which was a cloister Grail line race originally when it was created. It was actually created in seeding 2 before it had to be reseeded again, and all of that. So anyway, here they got the Hibiru strand 4. The Jehovian Anunnaki souls under Enoch's custodianship were to enter these, as well as some of these, but most of them were Jehovian Anunnaki, which were the ones that were descendant from the Cirrus A bipedal dolphin people, the original Anu Elohim Anunnaki. They considered themselves the pure strain ones and didn't like the others, those guys. All right. So Enoch was supposed to evolve this bunch of arrogant people. The specimens are very arrogant. There's a huge arrogance vibe that runs, a patriarchal arrogance vibe that runs through that whole Anu Elohim matrix. Now, here's where it got crazy. Not only were they getting raided, because all of these from that Iluli Levi, all of these were capable of crossbreeding directly. You could, create baby lines by raping a female human. and making her carry a child. So that was the end. That's where they could literally start really raiding and messing with the gene codes directly if they knew what they were doing, who they were combining. So Enoch was, he was doing his best to take care of these guys, the Nephi, the tribes of Nephi. Here's where problems started. There was a whole group. There was an exception made, and that was another founder's mistake, and they know it well. There was an exception made here where usually, to get into this form, you had to have evolved through the other ones. All right? There was no, you weren't going to be able to get in at stage 4 if you didn't do the stages before it. There were certain collectives of Jehovah and Anunnaki consciousness and some Nephilim consciousness, which were the Andromi, they were like half Andromi, half Anunnaki, and the Nephilim from seeding 2. Well, there's a bunch of them that already had some of the coding from seeding 2 because they had rated the human imprint, so they did have some human template more than the others. Why do we have to go through the first 3 stages? We can just enter here because we have our DNA all, enough of it to do that. That was a big mistake because what happened, this whole collective of Nephilim races and Necromaton Andromi Nephilim races from seeding 2 that had taken over here. They were the ones in the Bible, that the Bible even still has a little reference to they created, how is it worded, a breed of giants or something that were not intended by God because the angels came down and interbred with the daughters of men and created a race line called the Nephilim that was not supposed to be here. These guys, Nephilim, were created in seeding 2, and they had been behaving for a while, and they had expressed interest in wanting to do bioregenesis and wanting to do the Emerald Covenant, and they were allowed to enter at stage 4 into the Eluli Nephi, some of the Eluli Nephi tribes. These guys are the Archangel Michael Matrix guys. Now, when they were in the bioregenesis program, that was fine, but very soon after they got in, and this was why they got in the first place, they ran a con on the founders. The founders knew that part of them would probably do that, but they also knew the other part might not, so it was worth the risk, because at least some of them might be able to actually stay in the program. It was a calculated risk, and it should have been calculated better. Because what they did here was once they got into the Eluli Nephi bodies, a huge portion of this collective of Nephilim, particularly the Necromaton and Andromi Nephilim, which are the Archangel Michael Matrix people. They have them in the Andromeda star system, in Alpha Omega Centauri star systems. These guys had a history of being very nasty, just ruthless, really. They would do what they wanted, whenever they wanted, no matter whom it hurt or what it destroyed. And there had been seemingly some improvement in their evolution. Well, they were allowed in. Enoch was supposed to watch over these guys and make sure they, towed the line. Well, they didn't, and a huge bunch of them went over, broke the Emerald Covenant, and already bunches of them were in human body forms, in the Nephi form. What they did was the collectives, the Elohim collectives that had arranged all of this to happen. The Archangel Michael is part of the Elohim collective. What they did was they came in with spaceships and they picked up a whole bunch of them and took them up into Sirius A. A lot of them went into Alpha and Omega Centauri. A bunch of them went, and some of them they put in the Orion system. They took them there to upgrade their fallen angelic coding. Now that they had them in a human body, they combined more of the fallen angelic templates so they could get embodied oversouls and dark avatars into those bodies. These guys became what are called the Nephites. So if you ever hear anybody say, celebrate the return of the Nephites, yeah, I'd think twice before having that party. Because these are those. And Enoch was originally trying to help all of them evolve, and get out of the mess. The Michael Matrix was the primary group. There was actually a division in this group where one group stayed in the Emerald Covenant and followed through the bioregenesis program. And I forget what they called themselves. What was that name? Remember the division? Michael was one, and there was another translation of Michael. That it was in that detailed book that we were pulling from the plates. It's not out yet. Remember, you liked the name, Michaelu. Yeah, the Michaelu Matrix. Two different. They were once this whole Nephilim collective. The Michaelus stayed in the Emerald Covenant to finish the bioregenesis. The ones that became Michael are the ones that, decided they were going to take over the planet. And this is where they got into the game, and they started hybridizing with everything they could get their hands on. They started raiding tribes everywhere. And this is even before the Atlantean stuff started, the Atlantean drama started. This was only at stage 4 of the bioregenesis program. But you take these stage 4s and then hybridize them with stage 5s, and you get even more powerful body codes to have nasty dark things living in. Okay? Now, another name for the Nephites, the Archangel Michael Collective, has been Baal, B-A-A-L. That's the same collective as the Archangel Michael Collective. And that's also another word for the devil. In like spiritual texts, it has come down through as another word for the devil. What's funny is people get Lucifer, Baal, the devil, and Satan all mixed up as if they were one person. They're not. None of them are persons alone. They are collectives, and they are each different collectives running out of the fallen angelic matrices. Okay. When Az was reading before, he talked about the Lulatan family line that was used. It's a family line out of the Toth-Enki lineage that was used to create what became the Luciferian races. Then there was another group out of the Marduk, I think it was the Marduk-Draman line, wasn't it? The Marduk-Draman line. No, they're Anunnaki, Marduk-Draman, but they're Anunnaki crossed with Draconians. They had a family line called the Satan line. There's where we got Satan. We got Lucifer over here. Here's where we got Baal and Archangel Michael. That was the Nephilim collective. This is where you're getting your Alpha Omega order Melchizedeks. Alpha and Omega Centauri. They're the star systems, along with Andromeda, that they populate in the higher densities, in the Phantom Matrix. Okay, 68,000 BC, stage 5. And there was wars and all sorts of messes that happened between here and here because of this. All right, so we had Nephites come out of that. The tribe of Nephi, Eluli Levi tribe of Nephi, came out of that. And some of them stayed pure, where they stayed in the Emerald Covenant so they could come into the next level. Others from these guys just raided the next level, and they would literally, when one of the Nephi consciousness was trying to come into one of these bodies at fetal integration, one of these guys they'd be tracking them. They'd find out where the fetus bodies were, and they'd literally bounce them out on the current. So they'd displace the one that was trying to come in and literally possess from fetal integration the baby body patterns. 68,000 BC, stage 5, Eluli Nephi and Eluli Judah. They took the Nephi and the Judah ones, because the Judah ones were the ones connected to the Anu Seraphim, the Totes group, and these were the ones connected to the Enoch group, which were the Jehovian Anunnaki. There are two versions of these made. They became what are called the Anu Melchizedeks, and there's a whole story about the Anu Melchizedeks in Voyagers Volume 2 in the original edition, and it's in the second one as well. These were what you'd call Homo sapiens sapien, human hybrid. That was the closest to human that they were able to get, because they were only supposed to have 5 stages. It was from here that they were supposed to evolve enough, activate enough DNA, where they could go through Stargates 4 and 5 and get into the Terran time cycles of Earth, where they could begin to work on the next levels of their template from there. So they were supposed to ascend and get out of here by activation of Strand 5 when the gates were still open, but it didn't work that way. All right. Now, these were seeded into the Atlantean Egyptian human family line. Egyptian is a smaller family line of the Atlantean root race. Okay? So they were seeded. This particular combination of templates was seeded into this family line in Atlantis. And it came up with Eluli Judah plus Melchizedek Cloister human. That was the Melchizedek Cloister strand templates were used to give them the 5th strand template. And then that all was combined and seeded through the Atlantean Egyptian human form. So they picked up the Atlantean Egyptian coding. The Eluli Judahs plus Melchizedek Cloister became what were called the Lilibim. And the Melchizedeks. Lilibim were the ones. Now they're still on bioregenesis, right? Under Thoth's custodianship. They digressed into Illuminati when Thoth defected from Emerald Covenant in 22,340 BC. They became known as the Sons of Belil of Brua Atlantis. And the sons of Belil There's been a lot somewhere. Somebody has stuff out on them, and I'm not sure who. There's references to that in various like metaphysical texts and occult texts where they're considered bad guys. You know, look out for the sons of Belial. Well, these are them. And what these guys became, what's neat in the book that's coming out, hopefully by the end of the year, that has all the exhaustive history in it, it shows where these guys come down through Atlantis. We have Atlas kings coming out of Atlantis. We have Atlan kings coming out of Atlantis. And from various different king lines in Atlantis, like Antichristos king lines, that's where we end up with Larsa kings and all sorts of things that came up in through the Sumerian and Egyptian dynasties and Chinese dynasties and all sorts of them, because they invaded all of them. But there's literally a progression all the way through. There's not a break in these history lines. It shows the progression from 250,000 BC, when this mess all started, to where they progressively infiltrated, and all of the little pieces of history that are scattered around, and a few words left here and a few words left there. Kodajim, Anu Melchizedek's, under Enoch's custodianship. They digressed into Illuminati when Enoch defected from the Emerald Covenant in 10,500 BC, becoming the Illuminati Sons of Zadok of Nohasa, Atlantis. Anybody that's familiar with any of Enoch's teachings, there's a great heralding of the coming of the Nephites and the Sons of Zadok that is being taught in contemporary times. This is where that fits. So it's that Anu Melchizedek human hybrid races were progressively raided by Draconian, Reptilian, and competing Jehovian, Palladian, and Nibiruan Anunnaki fallen angelic collectives since Lemurian Atlantean times, evolving into numerous competing Illuminati races that progressively infiltrated and forced hybridization with human 12-tribe cultures, culminating in transposition of race identity of literally the whole human 12 tribes, races, transposition of race identity and world cultural dominion. That is how it got from its beginnings to here. It was progressive, stage by stage by stage. And this is why they've gone out, the fallen angelics have gone out of their way to hide the Atlantean records. Because if they were remembered, we'd know. We know the game. We know about the Templar quest. We know about the whole game. We know about the hybrids. Right now we're walking around as a bunch of people who think we might have come out of apes, and we're not really sure. We all think we're human. Half of us don't even know if we have a soul. We are very primed to be used and manipulated. But this is why the founders are determined, whatever it takes. They are bringing this information back, and that's why we're determined, Az and I are determined. We feel so grateful to have been trusted with, the first wave of bringing the information back, that even if we have to make ourselves unpopular in certain audiences, we will. Because I know it's the truth. He knows that's the truth. And I hope you guys can feel the truth that resonates in it. Once you know this truth, there is no turning back. There's no ever again being able to go back to light, love, and clueless. And it can be sad. It's almost like you want to have a funeral for your light, love, and clueless self. Because when I started to see the big picture and the detail that they've been giving it, I felt like I lost a part of my innocence. And I realized that at a certain level, the desire and quest for knowledge and wisdom has a burden that goes along with it. I felt for quite a while that I'd lost my innocence because I couldn't walk down the street in light, love, and clueless space and just openly love everybody and not worry about my biofield and think everybody would love me as much as I love them. Or just because I'm a nice person and wouldn't hurt an ant, that everybody else is like that too. It was a big wake-up call. And we're all moving into this. This is the easy part of the wake-up call, because there's going to be more things, I think, that take place in the next number of years on this planet that are going to bring that home to the people who are in denial. I wanted to be in denial. I spent about 6 months crying frequently and not wanting to be a speaker, not wanting to talk about it, not wanting to know, but realizing once you do, there's no going back. You cannot pretend you don't, or then you just con yourself. And then you have a choice, like keep conning yourself and then find something to just string yourself out on so you don't feel yourself anymore, but that's useless. Don't do that. So the other thing is dealing with it, facing it, and realizing there's a higher level up above that, where even though it looks this bad, and right now it's not great, that there is a truth and a power and a love to divine right order that can fix anything. And once we go to that space, that's where all of this depressing stuff, we start to find that we can make a direct difference, each one of us, in the healing of this. If we look at it as if we were defeated, or if it's hopeless, the picture's so big we can't do anything, we're going to feel miserable. We don't need to feel miserable. If we know how to run D12 frequency, we know how to progressively get our DNA mutations cleared, we will progressively be able to make a difference in this mess, not only for the human races, not only for the indigo races, but for any of the descendants of the Leviathan races that want out, because many of them got trapped too. They didn't mean to get caught up in what they got caught up in. They didn't mean to get possessed by D11 dark avatars. They didn't know how to protect themselves because the knowledge of how to protect themselves was taken off the planet, so they couldn't. So the Illuminati races, it's really interesting. There's several things happening in the big drama right now. One of them is there is a huge influx of Illuminati races from the higher levels making redemption contracts, which means a lot of people who are doing nasty stuff for a while on this planet are going to start to decide it's time to do their atonement thing. And they're going to start being guided by their own higher parts into assisting the Emerald Covenant races in whatever little way or big way they can. So they're going to be assisting rather than resisting. There's a huge amount that are going to resist, that are still puppets of the fallen angelic forces. But there's a whole bunch that are trying to get out. What we're going to find are lots of people that get stuck in between the two things. They don't know which path to follow. It helps to understand what the paths are. There's the path of Aramatana, which is the path of the D12 divine blueprint of this time matrix and of this planet. There's something called the path of Arimathea. That is a path in the phantom matrix. There's whole collectives that are going to be taken into this path of evolution. It has one good thing to say for it. At least it has the potential to evolve out of it after a very, very long time in phantom matrix under the dominion creator gods of the Anunnaki legions. This is where you have the Ruby Order people, the people who defected from the Emerald Covenant, who are supposed to work with the guardian groups in this time period. The path of Arimathea is a path that's very reminiscent of a lot of what we call the Ruby Order Anunnaki teachings. They have very self-important ascended masters telling you how it's going to be and only this way, and that's the only way you'll get through, and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And they tend to have a very attitude. I could name a few. Even a few of them are nice because they mean well, but boy, they could really just lighten up a little. You have people like El Mourier. All right, he's one of the ascended masters to D5 persons that he means well. He's working the path of Arimathea. He's taking people into that path. But the people that he's trying to take into that path are not human souls. They're not indigo souls. What they are souls that are still twisted from the Anunnaki matrices, that they know they couldn't let them loose in a Christed time matrix because they do the whole thing all over again. They're not mature enough or developed enough to actually be taken and entrusted with what it means to have the power and knowledge back in a safe system where they could cause harm to others. People that are Illuminati here that are still heck bent on causing harm, even if they're shown teachings and shown a way to do it better, and they still don't want to because they still get a bloodthirst out of it or a rush out of it. Some of them still do. They will be the ones that are guided into that path. But unfortunately, there's still a bunch of humans that are getting tricked because they don't understand the different paths. They're getting tricked into going into that matrix. They don't need to. The easy path is to stay in the light. And the light is the light of the D12 Christos template. There's another path that's going into the Phantom Matrix, and that path is worse than the path of Arimathea. That's the path, the Draconian path. It's the path of Phantom Earth. They're the ones that it's going to be very, very difficult to ever evolve them back out of there before the templates fragment. All right, so that's like the path of hell. All right, Hades and hell, the Phantom Matrix is what that place was called. That's what those words came from. They were referring to that. There are several different paths in this time matrix. Some people will be able to make big jumps. Indigo children will probably have an option to literally get out of density and go back up to like pre-matter liquid light, or they might want to take a stop on Gaia and density 3 or Terra and density 2 or any of the star systems there. They'll have an opportunity for what's called the path of full ascension. Then, for the majority of the people on the planet, that if they can get through enough where they're running at least a little bit D12 frequency in their templates where they can activate holophase Merkaba, a part of it, and they can get at minimum a 4.5 strand DNA strand activation. There is the bridge zone probability where they actually will have a time where we can evolve. The planet's actually going to go into this space-time where the planet itself is going to go into the same time, let's say, flash line sequence as that of inner Earth. What it's going to be experienced as is the portals of inner Earth are going to open, where they're going to start to learn that we have not been alone here at all. That's going to allow this planet time. It's going to allow it, I believe, about a 2,000-year cycle to complete what it needs to do before it can make its own ascension into, merger with Terra. So there's the bridge zone path over here for the people who can't fully get through up into density 2 or higher gates, and then for the people who can and choose to, who want to just get out of the whole Earth drama completely, will be able to go up, to at least out of density 1. So there are these various paths that are being created because of the dramas that are here. The only thing that's sad is the people that are right now being directed into the other paths that are taking them in the Phantom are not being told the options. The Ruby Orders are not teaching theirs that there is any option but the one they're offering. The founders are simply trying to show you what the big game is, so one thing is honored, your free will choice. The others are not honoring free will choice.